How much did your dad leave behind? The night after my dad passed away and the funeral had ended, my husband Brian asked me with a smile that seemed too happy. Didn't the funeral just end? But we need to clear these things up, or it'll cause disputes later on. How much was there? Brian kept asking persistently. Just so you know, it's not just me. Mom, me, and my brother Thomas are the heirs. Yeah, but I'm talking about your share, Sophia. Talk about a distasteful way to put it. I thought, yet figuring it would soon come out anyway. Dad put $3 million in a debit card for me. $3 million! Brian exclaimed, sounding pleased again, which really made me uncomfortable. The afternoon following the funeral, I received a message from Brian on my mobile phone. His voice sounded troubled. That debit card. What about the debit card? Surprised that you couldn't withdraw the money? I asked Brian coldly. How do I get that money out? Why should I have to tell you that? It seemed Brian truly didn't know that spouses of heirs had no rights. My name is Sophia, a 55-year-old housewife. I have a son named Daniel and a daughter named Abigail with Brian, who is the same age as me. I was born into a very ordinary family, went on to study ordinarily, got an ordinary job, and then married ordinarily, blessed with 2 children. Brian and I met at work. I thought I had been walking an utterly ordinary path in life. 5 years ago, my dad was diagnosed with a serious illness. At the age of 78. Despite his age, he had been free from sickness all his life, so the sudden discovery of the illness was a shock. The doctors said surgery was out of the question. However, due to his advanced age, the progression of the disease could be slow, and there was a chance he could live out his natural lifespan. I've heard all about the illness. But listening to the details, it doesn't seem all that bad. I've been healthy up till now. From here on, I'll just take it easy until it's my time to go. Dad said this calmly, much to our family's astonishment. When I reported back to Brian, how old is Dad again? 78. 78, huh? They say it's the era of living to 100 now, so it's not particularly early, is it? My parents could go at any time too. I guess it can't be helped. He spoke as if it were someone else's concern. I thought his comment was cold, but if something happened to my in-laws, perhaps I wouldn't be able to react much differently, so I decided not to say anything. Then, 2 weeks later, Dad said he had something to discuss and wanted us to gather. I'm fine, it's your parents' matter, right? But Dad said he wants you there too. He's probably going to say something like I have some last words, or ask us to take care of Mom if something happens, right? That might be the case. I'm not good with mourning. I'll be staying at home that day. With that said, I couldn't push any further and decided to visit my childhood home alone on the day. When I arrived, my brother Thomas and his wife Madison were already there. Where's Brian? He said he wasn't feeling well and decided to sit this one out. I see. Dad didn't say anything more. Well, working in food sales is busy work. Let him rest on his day off, he said. I felt terribly sorry for Dad. The truth was, Brian just didn't want to bother coming for no particular reason. And then, Dad began an unbelievable story. What? How much? Could you say that amount again? $11 million. We were so shocked by the number repeated that we were left speechless. According to Dad, 2 years ago, when his uncle passed away, he inherited a bit of money and decided to invest that amount in something. It was cryptocurrency that was starting to get popular at the time. I thought, it's money I never had anyway, and put it all in there. Then, it increased that much, huh? What surprised us most was not just the number, but that our elderly dad would try his hand at cryptocurrency, something we couldn't have imagined. So, what did you do with it? It became such a large amount that I thought it was best to stop there, so I pulled it all out and converted it to cash. That decision surprised me. I thought people who dabble in such things either keep trying to recover their losses, even going into debt to do so, or if they profit, they become greedy for more and continue. Guess it was good timing to pull out. After that, there seemed to be various problems, but I got out just before those happened. What an incredible luck! I'm astounded. I couldn't help but let out my true feelings. Dad just laughed shyly. So, what's today's discussion about? Well, it's about dividing up that inheritance. Don't talk about such unlucky things. It's the era of living to 100 now. It's too early for such discussions. When I said that, Dad laughed. Well, I thought the same, but these are discussions to be had while one is still healthy. I suppose so. So, that's why I wanted to have this talk with you and your partners. I was surprised again by Dad using the word partners. If something happens to me and suddenly such an amount appears before you, you might lose your way. And you might not know how to discuss it with your partners, right? Thomas and Madison exchanged troubled looks. So, I want you to be prepared in your hearts and think about how you'd use it after receiving it. That coming from the man who dumped his great-uncle's inheritance into cryptocurrency? Indeed. We all laughed at Thomas's comment. I was just really lucky. Knowing that, I wanted to make sure you all would handle it properly. I understood Dad's feelings very well. My brother, his wife, and I promised to do so, had a meal with our parents, and then headed home. What? The inheritance was actually a good story? Maybe I should have gone too. When I briefly summarized the meeting for Brian, he seemed surprised but then said, How rude to call it a good story about an inheritance. Well, yeah, but it's a significant amount of money we're talking about. How much are we getting? I frowned at Brian's way of speaking. I don't want to say. Come on, we're a couple, aren't we? No secrets between us. If you wanted to know, you should have come with me. Brian scratched his head uncomfortably at my response. Well, I was tired from work, and I didn't think it was going to be such good news. Good news? I involuntarily slammed my hand on the table. Do you think it's good news that Dad got an incurable disease and we're talking about his inheritance because of it? Sorry. He apologized sincerely, realizing I was genuinely angry. But Dad is still healthy, right? You said he wanted to talk about it while he could. That's true, but... The doctor said he could live a natural lifespan if things go well, so maybe it was a good opportunity to talk about it. I thought maybe he had a point. But my distrust of Brian didn't disappear. See? I'll consider your dad's feelings and visit to talk more. Seeing Brian so visibly pleased made me feel not just distrustful but also disgusted. After that, true to his word, Brian started visiting my parents' house frequently. On weekends, when the children said they were going to see their grandparents, Brian, who used to say he'd stay home and sleep, now eagerly joined them. And then one day, Abigail angrily said, I'm done with Dad. That day, Brian insisted on accompanying Abigail to visit Grandpa. What happened with Dad? According to Abigail, Brian had asked Dad how much the inheritance was during the conversation. And when Dad said, Let's not talk about that now. But it's a considerable amount, isn't it? I'd like to know too. Look forward to finding out when the time comes. Dad laughed and said, Can you believe what Dad said? I'll look forward to it then, with a laugh. Abigail's eyes filled with tears of frustration. I was speechless. When I got angry at what he said, Grandma defended him, saying Dad is an honest person. But that's not honesty. It's just rude. Mom was right. Brian was honest in a way. He always spoke his mind. He couldn't say something contrary to his feelings, a person without duplicity, a good man. I used to think so when we were younger and loved that about him. As we went through life together, I learned that nothing is purely positive. I'm someone who can't keep secrets. They say honesty doesn't pay, but if you're okay with that, I want us to be together. Those were Brian's words when he proposed. I was moved at the time, but it turned out to be just his insensitivity that could hurt others. It wasn't about being at a loss, it was about being disliked, which I gradually came to understand, but by then it was too late. Don't let Dad get close to Grandpa anymore. It's sad for Grandpa. Abigail tearfully pleaded, and I had already thought the same. And so, we only visited my parents' home on weekdays when Brian was at work. Eventually, Daniel and Abigail, as well as Thomas's 2 daughters, got married one after the other. I've seen all my grandchildren get married. I have no regrets left. Dad said happily and, after holding on for 5 years, passed away. At the age of 83. Though we had been preparing for 5 years, it was still a painful and sad farewell. Hey, how much did your dad leave behind? The night after my dad's funeral, Brian asked me with a smile that seemed too pleased. The funeral just ended, you know? But we need to clear these things up, or it'll cause disputes later on. How much was there? Brian kept asking persistently. Just so you know, it's not just me. Mom, me, and Thomas are the heirs. Yeah, but I'm talking about your share, Sophia. Talk about a distasteful way to put it. I thought, yet figuring it would soon come out anyway. Dad put $3 million in a debit card for me. $3 million! Brian exclaimed, sounding pleased again, which really made me uncomfortable. After the funeral ended successfully. Today, Madison and I will stay at the family home. Sis, you've been running to the hospital and must be exhausted, right? My brother and his wife said they would stay with Mom, and I went back to my own home. You must be tired too. Go ahead and take a bath first, and rest easy today. Brian treated me kindly. Really? Thank you. I'll go to bed first then. I left the cleanup to Brian and took his offer to go to bed early. And the next morning, that's when it happened. What's this? There was a piece of paper on the coffee table in the living room. Divorce papers. It was the divorce papers, already signed by Brian. That means, probably. I checked the bag I thought I brought back yesterday. Figures. Anne sighed. The $3 million debit card Dad had left for me was missing from my bag. Brian must have taken it. I had a feeling it would come to this. Yet, at the very end, there was a part of me that wanted to trust my partner of many years. That's why I deliberately left everything to Brian and went to bed early. How pathetic. I had given him one last chance. And it was Brian who squandered it. There's no pity left to give. I checked the time, and it was still 7 a.m. After getting ready for the day, I waited for the right time to start making moves. The afternoon after the funeral, I got a call from Brian. His voice sounding troubled. Hello? What do you want? That debit card. What about the debit card? Surprised you couldn't withdraw the money? I asked Brian with a cold voice. Brian is simple. I intentionally left the debit card. I knew he would think that if he had the card, he could withdraw the money. Then, I wrote a 4-digit number inside the card. He must have thought it was the PIN. But entering that number wouldn't authenticate anything. Because that number is my birthday. I don't know if he didn't remember my birthday, or if he thought Dad had set my birthday as the PIN. At this point, it doesn't really matter. But, as I expected, Brian took it as the PIN. He must have happily gone to the bank with it. The thought is so pitiable it's almost laughable. How can I get that money out? Why do I have to tell you that? Well, that money, I thought I'd take it. Excuse me? I was astonished. He was being honest about that too. Why would you think you're entitled to it? Well, we're married, so that's ours, right? So, I thought I'll give you the house, and I'll take this. I couldn't help but burst out laughing. Unfortunately, you have absolutely no right to that money. What? Inheritance money is not marital property. So, it belongs to me alone. What's that? I never heard anything like that. Brian was shouting over the phone. It seems Brian truly didn't know that a spouse of an heir has no rights. If you're considering inheriting a large sum. No, that's not right. If you're considering stealing a large sum, didn't you think it necessary to have some knowledge about it? While dreaming of a foolish adventure, I wish he had taken the time to learn at least that much. Just like a child. In all the worst ways. That part of him, supposedly being a good person, is clear. Honest, straightforward, without deceit. If that were truly him, he shouldn't have tried to take what wasn't his in such an uncharacteristic way. Not being able to stay true to himself until the very end. That seems like Brian's downfall. As I listened to Brian shouting various things over the phone, I thought about this. Poor man. Hey, are you listening? If you can hear me, answer me, hey. As I was lost in thought, Brian, irritated by my silence, snapped at me. Yes, I'm listening. What were you saying? Hey. Is that the kind of person you were? We're married, aren't we? You could at least give me half, right? Please. I'm not even asking for half anymore. A third would do. $1 million, I'll settle for $1 million. That's fair, right? Brian pleaded in a pitiful voice. Why should I give a part of the precious inheritance I received from my dear dad to an ex-husband? What? You left the divorce papers, so I've filed them. We're strangers now. I informed him, and Brian seemed to freeze on the other end of the line. You think you can just do that on your own? What's unilateral about it? You signed it and left it, so I just filled in my part and submitted it. Is there a problem? There is. A big one. You can't just file divorce papers based on your own unilateral decision. I wish he wouldn't shout such embarrassing things, wherever he might be. It's not unilateral. As I said earlier, we both agreed to this divorce when we signed. This is absurd. Who's the absurd one here? Can you come back once, please? There are things we need to discuss, like the distribution of property. Are you going to split the inheritance? No. I had to raise my voice a bit at Brian's overly happy response. It's about the distribution of property for the divorce. This house, the marital assets you've depleted, and others, it's about dividing them between us. Brian went silent at those words. I know about the savings you've been dipping into from our house fund. Yes, Brian had been secretly withdrawing money from the savings we had been accumulating for our retirement. I pretended not to notice, though I knew. Brian changed after hearing about Dad's inheritance 5 years ago. He started spending money freely. Going on trips with in-laws, treating colleagues lavishly. Each act might not have been significant, but he removed the limiters he had set for himself, buying whatever he wanted, going wherever he wished. Perhaps because he was trying to look good, even colleagues who had been cold to him started leeching off him, and he seemed happy to spend even more. Brian would unhesitatingly withdraw the shortfall from our joint account. Thinking about when Dad's inheritance would come in, he probably thought spending such petty cash wouldn't be a problem. But that was the savings I had been scrimping and saving for our retirement. The thoughtlessness of not considering someone else's hard work, seeing it merely as numbers, almost makes me nauseous. Brian had been happily living every day to the fullest for these 5 years, as if he were a child, shining his eyes like a little boy. I was disillusioned by such childish spending. I would have preferred it if he had spent it on another woman. "If you don't come back, I'll report the debit card as stolen to the police. Goodbye." I finished saying just that and hung up the phone, then turned it off. After that, Brian obediently returned home once and, in front of the children, complied with the distribution of property. Or rather, was made to comply. It seems Brian had planned to retire early and travel the world once he got his hands on Dad's inheritance. Dreaming big is free, but I wish he'd pursue those dreams on his own merit. For that reason, Brian had submitted his resignation at work. It was accepted, and though Brian did receive some severance pay, he unfortunately didn't get the full amount. Naturally. It was a resignation on his own terms, after all. Furthermore, even that amount became subject to the property distribution, so he couldn't keep all of it. I reluctantly decided to buy the house we were living in. Of course, at half the selling price, just Brian's share. The mortgage was already paid off, so transferring the money and changing the deed into my name completed the sale. After buying the house and reimbursing the portion of the marital assets Brian had squandered, including half of his severance pay, Brian was left with hardly any money. Far from early retirement, he now has to find a job again to make ends meet. Brian, crying, pleaded for a second chance, but I had no intention of agreeing. For the past 5 years, Brian had been dreaming of the day he'd receive the inheritance. He had joyfully made various plans for that day. He had filled a bookshelf with travel guides for a global journey. If he had been a boy, I might have fondly watched over that dream of someday traveling the world. But it was all a hollow dream built on the day Dad's life would end. I had no intention of hiding my feelings, nor did I want to spend my future with someone who eagerly counted down to such a day. It was all brought upon by Brian himself. I hope he finds new dreams to live for in the future. Dreams that, just like before, fittingly do not include me. And so, I divorced and sold the house we had lived in for a long time. Though part of me wanted to keep living in that familiar home, considering the chance of Brian lurking around, I decided to sell it. I also arranged for Mom and the children to move. You never know when Brian might turn up, asking for help. As a minimum contact, it seems they've only given out Daniel's phone number. Apparently, Daniel occasionally gets crying calls, but he just listens and then hangs up. Daniel requested a transfer at work and now lives in a provincial city. It's impossible for Brian to rely on Daniel for anything now. Abigail moved to a land she had been interested in before, knowing she could work from anywhere. As for Mom and I, we bought a house near Abigail and her husband, where we're living a leisurely life, occasionally taking care of what are my grandchildren and Mom's great-grandchildren. By the way, that world trip Brian had longed for. I could go on it myself, right? When I mentioned it, Mom said she wanted to go too. Maybe we'll take a leisurely cruise together soon. Of course, bringing Dad's photo with us. A rich and fulfilling later life. That's one thing I must thank Brian for showing me such a wonderful possibility. While I was out shopping, my phone rang with a call from Dob. Answering, I heard Dob's voice, sounding deflated. "Well, what a surprise, you're alive. I heard the house caught fire." "What?" Indeed, I had heard sirens earlier, but never imagined it was my house involved. "I heard a woman got seriously burned." "You okay?" "What? I'm out shopping. There shouldn't be anyone at home." "So it wasn't you who got taken away?" Dob sounded more disappointed than relieved. Dob definitely knows something about this fire. I just had this gut feeling. "I have many questions, but they can wait. I'm going to check on the house." I hung up and started running. My home, meant to be a modest yet warm sanctuary, was engulfed in flames. I can't believe it burned down. I've always held back, but if Dob was planning to hurt me, I'd never let it slide again. Sooner or later, people like Dob are bound to face their downfall. If that's the case, I'll be the one to push him over the edge. My anger is unstoppable. I am Sharon. A single, 40-year-old office worker. Well, perhaps not so ordinary. I'm a big fan of Meriwether, a male idol from Kiss Me Prince. I'm so hooked that I pour most of my monthly salary into supporting him. Meriwether has this younger brother vibe that's very healing to watch. I record all his shows, and for live events, I'm at my computer 10 minutes before tickets go on sale, ready to battle it out. My family and relatives might shake their heads, but this happiness is something only a true fan can understand. As long as I have someone to love, I should feel fulfilled, or so I thought. But now, Clayton, the last of my close friends from college, has gotten married. Looking around, I'm the only one left unmarried. The reality I've been avoiding all this time has finally caught up with me. Overwhelmed, I impulsively signed up on a matchmaking website. And I decided to attend a party organized by the matchmaking site, where I was destined to meet someone special. Wait. Meriwether? A young man who could be mistaken for Meriwether from afar was there. During the mingling time, I made a beeline for him. "Excuse me. You're Meriwether from Kiss Me Prince, right?" He laughed, amused. "People say I look like him, so I've styled my hair and vibe to match." His name was Clayton, 5 years my junior at 35. But youthful enough to pass for his 20s. As a self-confessed idol fanatic, I was completely charmed by Clayton. Clayton seemed to take a liking to me too, and we started dating. He treated me like a fan on our dates, and I found myself falling for him, projecting Meriwether onto Clayton. In hindsight, it was odd that such a desirable man would choose a 40-year-old idol otaku like me, but at the time, I was oblivious. Soon, I received a formal proposal. The proposal took place at a location where Meriwether once proposed to the lead actress in a TV drama. Lost in my romantic fantasy, I accepted his proposal without hesitation. However, just before we were to register our marriage, Clayton brought a high school boy to our date. "Actually, I have a son living with me." The boy introduced as his son, Dob, didn't resemble Clayton much. He was a quiet-looking kid. Clayton is 17 years old. Wearing thick glasses and with unkempt hair. His gloomy appearance was evident as he wouldn't even make eye contact with me. "I should have come clean sooner, but just couldn't find the words. I'm sorry, Sharon." His apology pose, so reminiscent of Meriwether's that it seemed studied, unexpectedly triggered my maternal instincts. "I suppose I can forgive you." We were a completely foolish couple. Then, I overheard Dob muttering under his breath. "Just another wrinkled old lady." I couldn't believe my ears. "What?" It was said so naturally that I wondered if I had misheard. I asked Dob to repeat himself, but Clayton interrupted. "Dob seems happy to have a new mom. Let's get along." Clayton and I then went to submit our marriage license. Since the office was closed, we left it with a security guard and officially became husband and wife. Originally, I lived in a house with plenty of empty rooms, so I decided to have Clayton and Dob move in. To be precise, the rooms weren't exactly empty but filled with merchandise of my beloved. But now, I was going to live with my real beloved. I decided to let the merchandise sleep at my parents' house. It was a significant decision for me. Packing away my cherished Kiss Me Prince goods into cardboard boxes, I made a promise to put Meriwether on hold for a while and focus on building a warm family. I thought the fun times as a family of 3 would begin once Clayton and Dob moved in, but that didn't happen. Clayton, claiming to be busy with work, would stay at the office 2 or 3 nights a week, leaving me and the gloomy Dob alone at home most of the time. Dob continued to avoid eye contact and seldomly spoke. Except for school hours, he barely went out, spending most of his time locked in his room playing video games. Yet at meals, he would mutter barely audibly complaints about the meat being hard or the food not being worthy of the name. While I tolerated his complaints as childlike behavior, his lack of initiative in job hunting or studying while gaming all day bothered me. So, I brought it up with Clayton when he returned home late one night. "What's going on with Dob's career path?" Clayton responded with apparent annoyance. "I'm leaving it up to Dob. He should do what he wants." I mentioned that Dob didn't seem to be job hunting or studying at all. But Clayton wouldn't take it seriously. "Look, Sharon, can't you see? It's late. I just got home. I'm tired. Can you not stress me out with trivial matters?" Despite his fatigue, shouldn't he be concerned about his child's future? Was it strange that I, once a stranger to them, was the only one worried? That thought crossed my mind, but I couldn't voice it further. It was just sad that Clayton, who used to dote on me, now treated me as a nuisance. Then, one day, Dob unusually brought home a girl. She was a quiet girl, wearing glasses, just like Dob. I had thought he wasn't the type to attract someone, but perhaps Dob had gotten himself a girlfriend. After eating and drinking in the living room, they whispered to each other for a while before leaving the house. Honestly, I was the one who felt nervous. Until recently, the thought of becoming a mother hadn't crossed my mind, but now, was I to educate teenagers about sex all of a sudden? I was relieved when they quietly left. I watched from the second-floor window as Dob and the girl walked away side by side. That's when it happened. I noticed a woman glaring at me from over the fence of the neighboring house. The sight was so terrifying that my body froze, unable to move. The woman soon disappeared behind the fence. I wanted to discuss it with Clayton immediately, but he didn't come home that night. Just remembering the woman's gaze from the daytime frightened me, making it hard to fall asleep. Perhaps due to the stress, I came down with a cold the next day. Dragging my heavy body to work, dealing with Dob's complaints, and after managing the household chores, Clayton came home just as I was lying down. I tried to bring up the woman I saw the previous day. But seeing my intent expression, Clayton grimaced. "Is this about Dob again? Got more complaints?" "It's not a complaint. By the way, it seems Dob has got himself a girlfriend." Clayton sneered, looking pleased in a distasteful way. For a moment, his smile, reminiscent of Meriwether, was soothing. Until he spoke again. "That's my boy. The art of roping in simple girls, I taught him well." "Simple girls?" I echoed back, and Clayton hastily corrected himself. "No, I misspoke. Just shared some tips on wooing a girl he likes." Then, he gently tapped my head. "Thanks for all your hard work. I appreciate what you do for me." Being treated this way used to bring me the utmost joy during our dating days. But now, I couldn't shake off the doubts in my heart. Was I considered a simple girl too? Was I being strung along? But for what reason? I'm just a temp worker, neither wealthy nor well off. After Clayton went to take a shower, I rummaged through his wallet as a precaution, but found no suspicious receipts. Still, I couldn't shake off a bad feeling and grew increasingly distrustful of Clayton. And so, I never got around to talking about that woman. The next morning, Clayton had already left for work by the time I woke up. As I went downstairs to make breakfast, I was greeted by the pleasant smell of sausages cooking. Something that had never happened since we got married. To my surprise, Dob was preparing breakfast for me in the kitchen. Sausages and fried eggs with salad and yogurt. He had even poured me a cup of coffee. Wow, this is amazing! What's all this for? Dob, avoiding eye contact again, murmured in a soft voice. You're not feeling well, right? Thought I'd at least make breakfast. For the first time, I felt a genuine warmth and care coming from Dob. I'm so happy. Thank you. Embarrassed, or perhaps ignoring my gratitude, Dob shoved the frying pan into the sink. He didn't do the dishes, but it was a start. I'm off to school. With that, Dob grabbed his bag and left through the entrance. Savoring this moment of joy, I sat alone at the dining table and began my breakfast. Let's eat. Any homemaker knows there's significance even in a simple meal prepared for them. I reached for the coffee first, intending to eat everything, but in my excitement, I knocked over the cup. The coffee Dob poured out spilled all over the table. Oh no, I'm such a klutz. Although regrettable, it didn't dampen my spirits. Quickly wiping the table and finishing my breakfast, I felt somewhat lighter. Right, I need to go grocery shopping. And we're out of detergent, too. I'll head to the cheaper supermarket a bit farther away. I walked to a supermarket I don't usually visit. Passing by a fire engine on the way made me feel a bit uneasy. I hoped whatever house it was heading to would be safe. While shopping, my mobile phone vibrated. It was a call from Dob. Answering, I heard Dob's unexpectedly indifferent voice. Well, what a surprise, you're alive. Alive? What was he talking about? As I puzzled over his words, Dob dropped a bombshell. The house burned down. I saw it on social media. What? I did hear sirens earlier, but to think it was my house. Heard a woman got seriously burned. Are you okay? Something felt off. This wasn't the same Dob who showed kindness earlier. His words felt distant, almost mocking. What? I'm out shopping. No one should be at home. So it wasn't you who got taken away? The art of roping in simple girls, I taught him well. Dob must know something about this fire. I felt it instinctively. There's a lot I want to ask, but that can wait. I need to see the house for myself. I hung up and started running, catching a taxi to rush to the scene. When I arrived, the house was indeed completely destroyed. A crowd had gathered in front of what used to be my home. Leighton from the neighborhood approached me excitedly. You're safe, that's good. A young girl in a uniform was taken to the local emergency hospital. Who is she? I couldn't confidently answer the question, but there was one person I could think of who might be the girl in uniform. It was Dob's girlfriend who had visited our house recently. I was stopped by the police, who mentioned they wanted to talk later due to the incident's nature. I got back into a taxi and headed to the emergency hospital. As the taxi swayed, tears began to form. My home, supposed to be a modest yet warm sanctuary, was all gone. I can't believe it was completely consumed by flames. And Dob's attitude on the phone earlier kept bothering me. If his kindness this morning was only superficial, intending to harm me afterward, I would never show leniency again. Sooner or later, people like Dob would face their reckoning. If so, I was ready to be the one to push him. My rage was unstoppable. At the hospital, I tried to inquire about the situation but was denied due to privacy concerns, unable to meet the girl brought from our house. As I sat in the lobby, a woman rushed in, frantic. Where's Bess? I saw on the news she was severely injured. It's okay. The news was incorrect. She suffered burns to her face and limbs, but her life is not in danger. I was startled. I knew this woman. She was the one who had glared at me through the fence that day. Noticing me, she introduced herself with a business card. My name is Chanel. I'm Clayton's wife and the mother of Dob and Bess. I exclaimed in surprise. But I'm Clayton's wife. Chanel seemed to want to explain, but decided visiting her daughter was more urgent. Sharon, Please come with me. In the hospital room, the girl who had visited our house, Dob's girlfriend, lay in bed. Upon seeing me, she burst into tears. I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. Comforted by Chanel, Bess sobbed and revealed the whole story. Turns out, Bess wasn't Dob's girlfriend but his sister. She had admired her kind brother since they were young. But some point in time, her brother changed. She said he learned from our father how to wrap simple girls around his finger. After that, he rarely came home. Probably because he was living with me, but Dob told Bess he was living with a convenient woman. Even when he did come back, seeing my brother repeat his misogynistic remarks, Bess wished for the brother she remembered. How can I get my kind brother back? She asked Dob, and to that he answered like this. I want you to set fire to the house of Dad's mistress, Sharon. Bess, swayed by Dob, scouted my house for this reason. That's why Bess had come to my house. After much hesitation, thinking of her brother, she went through with it. But called the authorities immediately after realizing the gravity of her actions. To save me, supposedly asleep inside, she broke a window to enter the house and got injured. Wait. What do you mean supposedly asleep? Through tears, Bess answered. My brother planned to put sleeping pills in your coffee. A chill ran through me. Had I not spilled my coffee, I might not have been safe. Chanel, in a near frenzy, scolded Bess and apologized to me. How could you do such a foolish thing? You nearly killed someone. Sharon, I don't know how to apologize enough. It was a lack of supervision on our part. What Dob and Bess did was terrifying. About that, I started, addressing my lingering doubts. Dob is legally my child now, right? We submitted the marriage license. Chanel hesitantly took a piece of paper from her bag. It was Clayton's family register. Indeed, Chanel's name was listed as his wife. My husband had previously deceived another woman in the same way. You and Clayton submitted the marriage license after hours, didn't you? She was spot on. Because he's already married, it should have been rejected, but the security guard accepted it after hours. Probably, the office tried to contact Clayton's mobile afterward, saying the license is invalid due to bigamy. Faced with this unbelievable truth, I felt dizzy. Why would Clayton do something like this? Chanel sighed deeply. Her forehead marked with deep lines of hardship. Sharon, by any chance, are you a fan of Meriwether from Kiss Me Prince? My husband is obsessively confident in his resemblance to Meriwether. He completely imitates Meriwether's fashion, hair, and gestures, approaching female fans to cheat and revel in the thrill. He can't be satisfied unless women idolize him like an idol. I've had enough this time. At that moment, the door of the hospital room opened, and a flustered Clayton entered. Seeing Chanel and me together, he had a look of regret. With fiery anger in my eyes, I glared at Clayton. So we were strangers all along. You said you were staying at the office, but you were actually going back to Chanel's? Clayton frantically tried to explain, but I wasn't listening anymore. I'll be filing for damages, including for the house your son burned down. We're not related, so it won't be dismissed as a family matter. I grabbed my bag and strode out of the hospital room. Behind me, I could hear Chanel and Clayton arguing. As I vowed not to let this end here, I went back to my parents' home. Afterward, Dob was arrested by the police. At my request, Bess was not arrested and was able to go home after being discharged from the hospital. Bess's face was left with scars from the burns. The emotional scars inflicted by her brother wouldn't heal easily. She would have to carry the heavy cross of having committed arson. I thought there was no need to punish her further. As for Dob, who showed no remorse, I intended to let the authorities handle him. Dob was about to turn 18. He was likely to be tried as an adult, not protected by juvenile law. While preparing the lawsuit, the doorbell rang. There stood Clayton. Sharon, I'm really sorry about Dob. Can we start over? I want you to be my fan again. Can you give me that energy of liking someone? Can you give me that energy of liking someone? Was a classic line from Meriwether's concerts. The old me would have been swayed, but now it just seemed like a mockery of Meriwether. You're not an idol. Just a 35-year-old man who looks like one. And if you don't realize it soon, you'll continue to embarrass yourself. At my words, Clayton, flush with shame and anger, lashed out at me. What the hell? You've always seen me as just a substitute for Meriwether, haven't you? I can't say I was without fault. But Clayton, having cleverly orchestrated this situation, now acted as if I was to blame. Yes, and I've realized it. You're neither Meriwether nor my ideal prince. Just a middle-aged man full of self-delusion. I slammed the content certification for the compensation claim I had prepared into Clayton's hands. This arson incident is the result of your misguided teachings. You'll take full responsibility. I'll add on the amount for deceiving me, so make sure you pay up. Otherwise, I'll sue you for marriage fraud. Clayton, who had come to plead for reconciliation, was instead faced with a compensation claim and turned away in defeat. Self-centered to the end, Clayton left filled with disappointment. Perhaps frightened by the threat of a lawsuit for marriage fraud, Clayton later transferred the compensation amount, significantly more than the market rate, in one lump sum. This must have drained Clayton's savings completely. I heard that Chanel also divorced him and demanded compensation. For a while, he'll be without money, making it difficult to maintain the idol-like hairstyles and clothes. As for Daub, he was tried as an adult and sentenced to prison. During the trial, Daub's stubborn refusal to show any remorse, blaming the series of crimes on me, seemed to worsen the impression of the jury. As a result, he received a heavier prison sentence than usual. Of course, he was expelled from high school. Daub's misdeeds became widely known in the local community, making it impossible for him to continue living there after his release. In the evening, I bought a number of pen lights and headed to the park. Girls all dolled up were waiting in high spirits, waving their light sticks. Today was the long-awaited live concert of Kiss Me Prince. I dug out the merch I had put to sleep and resumed my fandom. Going to the live with female friends I made in the fandom is now my greatest joy. After all, the charm of having a crush lies in them being out of reach. Vowing never to make the same mistake again, I headed towards the live venue. I wish I never had a daughter, my mother Chloe screamed hysterically. Once you're in high school, you're out of here. My father David threw things as he spoke. Our younger brother Daniel, years apart, looked at us with a mocking sneer. This house is like a dwelling for demons. Even without a place to go, we must leave soon. For the sake of my precious sister Sophia and my own life. My name is Amelia. This spring, I joyously turned 40. When I was about 20, I thought being in my 40s was ages away, but after turning 25, the countdown of age seemed to speed up. But back in my teens, every day felt endlessly hellish. I have a twin sister, Sophia. Our family runs a small chain of restaurants in the city. Well, it's just about 3 restaurants, nothing grand. It's not an age-old family business. It expanded to 2 under my grandfather and just 1 more since my father took over. Once you step out of the local area, almost no one knows our restaurant's name. Our small restaurants hardly stand a chance against the big chains. Yet, my parents always had this strong sense of being business-owning family. My father was saying so. Especially when it came to the issue of succession, my parents unusually desperate, even from a child's perspective. First off, as twins, we were always told, you'll be future star CEOs just for being twins. Grow up beautiful. Thus, from a young age, we underwent rigorous beauty care. It would have been better if we were plain, but unfortunately, we inherited good looks from our reasonably attractive parents. Under their educational policy, we had our eyebrows neatly done as soon as we were aware, and my mother would apply lotion to our skin every day after bath. I wonder now if slathering all those chemicals on a young child's skin did more harm than good. On top of that, we had our own beautician by the age of 5. Unbelievable, right? I've never heard of anyone else having this, but it's true. I couldn't share this with classmates without making them jealous. We were also under strict weight management, hardly ever indulging in sweets or hearty meals as kids. My maternal grandparents, coming from a more typical employee family, tried to treat us with homemade dishes and snacks, but my father disapproved and my mother followed suit. Consequently, we became distant from my maternal grandparents. Due to differing educational views, "Don't interfere anymore," our parents would lash out. We had lessons too, piano, ballet, and skating as well, since it could connect us with rich heiresses. We were never pampered. To our parents, we were products for the future. Everything was for the sake of expanding the business. As a child, I didn't realize this and genuinely believed, I'm loved by my parents. Their strictness is a sign of love. Someday, I'll take over the business and make them happy. Sophia thought the same. But then, a life-changing event occurred. When we were in elementary school, a baby brother was born. Named Daniel, he was the only boy in the family. Seeing him, a boy is more suitable for succession. Our parents decided. So, they shifted their focus entirely to him, stopping all our lessons and even the strict beauty regimen. The beautician was gone. That would have been fine. But then one night, I overheard my parents talking. I never really wanted a daughter. I thought twins would be good for publicity, but if it's a boy, I couldn't care less. Yeah, I agree. A woman isn't suitable to take over the company. All our shop managers are men, and it's better if men are in charge. When you think about it, having 2 daughters is just a waste of money. What should we do about it, then? They were talking about us as if we were just some bulky trash they needed to get rid of. Up until then, I had convinced myself that their recent coldness was just because they were busy with our little brother. I couldn't comprehend what was happening. After that conversation, I slowly began to notice a change in how they treated us. First, we were forbidden to go out and play with friends on holidays. My mother explained, you could get hurt. But we always ended up helping at the main shop on holidays. In essence, we were being used as pieces of the household to prevent us from going out and playing. It must be a strategy thought up by our parents to make up for lost time. When we served food to the customers, "What cute twins! Good for you, helping out," they would say. There's nothing praiseworthy about it. We were being forced to do it. My parents, getting carried away with the situation, started making us work in the shop on holidays, doing simple waitressing, and eventually even had us sing and dance to popular songs. We're known as the lovely little sisters, and needless to say, our popularity brought more customers to the shop. But nobody realized that our freedom was being sacrificed behind the scenes. On weekends, we were sent to the shop. Don't let your grades drop. It would look bad. And on weekdays, despite being elementary school students, we had to study late into the night. We couldn't slack off in practicing the songs and dances for the shop. Our overly packed schedule, like that of an unreasonable full-time employee, left us exhausted every day. Perhaps due to fatigue, or maybe stress, our adolescent bodies, despite not eating much, started to gain weight easily. Once our parents realized we were of use to them, they became fussier about our appearances. Make sure you manage your weight, they would say, giving us mostly vegetables, typical of what a model would eat. Although we were never denied food, such a diet was too healthy for a growing teenager. Because of this lifestyle, there were times in middle school when I missed my periods. Meanwhile, my brother Daniel, who had been doing karate since he was young, didn't gain weight easily. He was treated differently. If you're going to be a future entrepreneur, you need to know good food. And he alone ate high-quality ingredients. For a teenager, resentment over food is significant. The treatment from my parents, coupled with the disparity in meals between us siblings. It was enough reason to resent Daniel. I think it was only natural that the bond with Sophia would become stronger. One day, after dedicating our youth to the shop and house, and even beginning to resent our parents, my father called us. It would be embarrassing if word got out that an idiot came from our house, so make sure you go to a high school with a good reputation. He said so. It was the beginning of 8th grade in middle school. Despite barely managing our grades while helping at the shop, it was impossible to meet such expectations. I asked if at least we could be excused from helping at the shop, but he didn't listen. Getting into a famous high school becomes a marketing slogan, he said. There was no fighting back for a mere middle schooler. If you end up in a low-tier high school, don't bother coming. Threatened like this, we studied desperately. In the following year, my sister got into the high school our parents wanted, but I didn't. My father was furious, throwing things around, luckily not hitting anyone. But I was terrified he might hit Sophia, who was trying to protect me. My mother also holding her head. Why has it come to this? Why are you so useless? Hysterically yelled. It was like a scene from hell. Was it my fault for not getting into high school? Wasn't my effort worth recognizing? Only Sophia, who understood me, hugged and cried with me. Daniel, resembling our father, looked down on me as if to say, that's why women are. It was infuriating. Why do you have to mess up my life? My father said. If anyone was messing up a life, it was my parents messing up ours, but I couldn't say that. Enough. The family heir is a man. We don't need women. Should have done this sooner. Listen, we'll pay for the tuition, but don't you dare come home. It looks bad. Once you two are in high school, both get out. Don't ever come back. He slammed the newspaper on the floor. At that sound, Sophia and I flinched, looking at each other, tears in her eyes. We couldn't stay here. It wouldn't just be high school. College entrance would be the same. I was a bit weak today, but I am her older sister. Understanding my intention, Sophia nodded. Indeed, she's my other half in this world. Quietly holding each other's hands, we glared at our parents. Understood. And simply replied. My father said, you'll come crying back, but I won't help. But I thought I was not going to cry. A few days later, on the night of our middle school graduation, Sophia and I left home. For about 2 days, we slept in a park, but noticing a homeless person watching us with a creepy smile. We realized living on the streets wasn't feasible for 2 kids. There were no adults we could rely on. That's when the faces of our maternal grandparents came to mind. They had been estranged from us for scolding our parents about proper child rearing. Maybe they would be on our side, but our hope was dashed. Even after explaining our situation to our middle school and borrowing a phone from our former teacher to contact them. I'm sorry, but we don't think of her as a child anymore. We don't want to have anything to do with you guys either. We were rejected by our maternal grandfather, Andrew. Apparently, unbeknownst to us, my mother had been extorting money from them. It was understandable that they wanted nothing to do with us. Just when I thought nothing was going right. How about coming to my place? It might be cramped for 3. Our former teacher Scarlett offered. We knew if our parents filed a missing person report, it could jeopardize Scarlett's position because of us, runaway girls. But we also knew our parents wouldn't bother. Most importantly, there was no one else we could unconditionally trust and rely on. We said, please, teacher. With asking for shake hands. Sensing our tension, Scarlett joked a bit. Understood. And smiled. Thus, a new life began for Scarlett and 2 of us. Even if you're a bottom-tier high school, you still pay tuition. Our parents said they'd pay for tuition, but in reality, we were treated as if we declined enrollment. They would have thought once we left home, it should be better to spend all the money on Daniel. We can't even go to school. As we were disheartened, Scarlett offered. Can you do part-time? I wish I could cover all expenses, but it's a bit tough right now. I'll support you in other ways. Like this. Right. High school students can work part-time. We weren't like before. Realizing that, it seemed Sophia had the same thought. We don't need money. But could you help us with our studies? Scarlett was surprised at our request. Of course, but what will you do? We'll save money working part-time for a year. No, 2 years. Then we'll go to high school. But our studies might suffer. That's why we need you. You can rely on me for money. No, it's not that. Relying on you would feel like losing to our parents. It's probably just us, but we want to prove them wrong on our own. She was silent for a while, contemplating. It's understandable. We were planning to delay it for a year or two, just out of spite for our parents. Was it the right resolve, or just childish stubbornness? After a pause, all right, she said. A year later, Sophia and I worked multiple part-time jobs and, with Scarlett's advice, entered an online high school. It was cheaper and we could continue working. We also rented a room next to Scarlett's house. We didn't want to compromise her position by living with her continuously, though we never wanted to contact our parents again. We need your consent to rent a house. We reached out. As long as we don't see your faces, do whatever. And they agreed easily. In reality, we hardly lived in that room, mostly staying at Scarlett's place. But it was a necessary precaution. Scarlett helped pay some of the rent. We refused to let her pay it all. She supported us thoroughly, from studies to personal life. Though she was in her 20s and more of a sister, she had become our mom. Thanks to her, we graduated from high school and, despite a delay of about 2 years, made it to a fairly prestigious university. The support from Scarlett was invaluable. At university, Sophia and I had another goal besides graduating. That's why we attended university. That was starting a business. To gain the knowledge and qualifications needed, every day was filled with part-time work, not easy, but we were determined. 3 years after graduating, we finally opened Cafe and Bar ANS Delightful, serving coffee, sweets, pizza, and sandwiches during the day, and alcohol in a stylish setting at night. Cafe and bars weren't as common then, but it caught on, and within 5 years, we opened a second location. We did it, Amelia! Yes, we did! Sophia! We had been betting everything on this second shop long before it opened. Our plan was to establish credibility and confidence, then open this shop near our parents' restaurant. Because that's what I had decided. By chance, a property became available right across from their most cherished third shop, allowing us to open our second shop. It was the start of a delightful revenge, not that we were doing anything special. We simply welcomed customers every day with all our heart. But our shop, run by the beautiful sisters, was already quite popular from our first location. Rumors spread that the popular sisters were temporarily at the second location. The place quickly filled up. Within 2 days of opening, we surpassed our sales goal, a complete success. Naturally, word got to our parents' restaurant. On the 7th day after opening, they're mocking us. Our parents stormed into our shop during business hours. Exactly as we expected. The shop was buzzing. Some customers whispered, "Isn't that the owner of the shop over there?" Sophia and I, smiling, faced our father. "Please, quiet down, customer," calmly said. "Don't joke with me. What's this about? Why open a shop near mine? So selfish. Our customers are decreasing because of here. Sly and unbecoming." Their words made us burst into laughter. Where we set up shop is our choice, as long as we pay the rent, right? We're not joking around. Exactly. Calling us sly and unbecoming. Please don't spout such vulgar words in front of the customers. Our overly calm only aggravated them more. After all, they had us working in customer service since we were kids. Controlling our emotions like this was easy. Then, what an attitude towards your parents! Our father shouted. The shop stirred. Parents? What, a family feud? Curious and confused glances turned towards us. Parents? You mean the ones who forced us to work in their shop as children and threw us out for not getting into the high school they wanted? Considering parents as those who treated their child as a product, enforcing weight control and stealing freedom? Our words caused a murmur among the customers. That's terrible. Or, so that's the kind of person he is. I hear words like, some customers, who knew us from childhood, that place has been strange since they had a boy, commented. Our parents, realizing the tense atmosphere, turned pale. Ah, No! That's not it. These girls are just rebellious. We only had them help in the shop for social learning. Our father was explaining with an over-gesture to everyone, but it backfired. I can't believe it. They must be telling the truth about their father. Isn't it a case for child services? Admitting they had to help is just ridiculous. The customer's exchange was unstoppable, and he kept repeating, "That's not it." But no one listened. Our mother, "I protected these kids," trying to claim her innocence, said, "Could you please leave? You guys are disturbing the other customers," I said, attempting to escort them out when suddenly, "Shut up." Our father raised his fist at me. I instinctively shrank back. Then, "Stop it." An elderly man, who had been quietly enjoying his sandwich and coffee, intervened. "Enough. How embarrassing. You two are disturbing people's meals. Get out." Other customers joined in. "That's right, get out." I got a call asking me to leave. "What is it?" Angry, our parents were quickly escorted out by a burly customer. He whispered something in their ears, turning their faces pale, and they never came back in. The shop erupted in applause. "You all had it tough. We support you. Keep going." Encouraged by these kind words, we said, "It's good to have a shop." That's what I thought from the bottom of my heart. Later on, our shop became the talk of the town after the incident with our parents, leading to the closure of all 3 of their shops. It turns out, the elderly man who saved me from our father's punch was our neighbor. His spreading of the incident branded their chain as run by a violent manager, causing a loss of popularity. While their customers dispersed, many became our regulars, liking our shop, thanks to the elderly man. With our parents' business gone, Daniel, who had been groomed as the successor, was lost. He blamed us for his ruined life and wreaked havoc at home, giving our parents a hard time. Soon after, our mother called, pleading to at least employ him in our shop. Of course, we politely refused. Our shop, run by beautiful sisters, only hires beautiful-hearted people. We had no room for a brother like our father. By the way, both Sophia and I got married in our mid-30s. Continuing the business. Due to the twins, we both fell for the same customer inadvertently. Just as we braced for a sibling rivalry, it turned out they were twins too. They never came together, so we never realized. Each thinking, "He seems slightly different today." Luckily, Sophia liked the older brother, and I liked the younger one, so crisis averted. Thanks God. Now, the shop is a family business, involving our husbands. Our children are not twins though. All they look so alike with each other as they could be siblings, the power of twin genes. We have no plans to train them for business, but seeing their interest in playing shop, they might be standing at the shop's front soon. What a joy that would be. As for our teacher Scarlett, she married around the time we opened our shop. "Now, you two are settled," saying so in her happy wedding, which was impression. Recently, her family has been visiting our shop, continuing our family's close relationship. We've repaid all the rent and support she gave us, but I still want to repay her in various ways. She was more than a mother, a sister, and a mentor. A person who gave us immense and warm love. Someday, we hope to return love to others, like she did. First, to guide our children towards a bright life. All right, let's keep up the good work today. Mommy's promise comes first, so please go to the hospital with this. My husband takes out $20 from his wallet and hands it to me. Overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events, I could only stand dumbfounded, watching him drive away in his car. Unbelievably, he left his wife, struggling with her water broken, to prioritize picking up and dropping off his mother for her hobby classes. Despite the harassment from his mother and the numerous difficulties I faced, I tolerated it all, thinking of our soon-to-be-born child. But now, it's clear to me. Someone who treats their child so poorly doesn't deserve to be a parent. Bearing the recurring pain, I made up my mind to face childbirth alone. My name is Kristen. I married Scott right after graduating from college. Scott and I have an age difference of 3 years, and we have led a fairly happy life. He was one of my college clubmates. He seemed to have taken a liking to me when I joined as a freshman, and looking back, his passionate advances were almost embarrassing. As a young adult, a guy's appealing inevitably seemed cool, and I reciprocated his affection, leading to a smooth relationship from 3 months after my enrollment until graduation. Even after marriage, he was deeply in love with me, so I never worried about infidelity. He boasted at work about his happiness in returning home on time every day to eat the dinner I cooked while it was still warm, so I doubted any woman would intentionally approach him. However, he has always been particularly kind to women, attracting some attention. But since he was always devoted to me, I never let my gaze wander. Yet, there's a reason why I described our seemingly perfect marriage as fairly happy. That reason is his mother, Evelyn's presence. I thought the mother-in-law and daughter-in-law conflict was a thing of the past, but she frowned upon seeing me. "What's the purpose for today?" It was all of a sudden. "You should have informed me in advance so that I could be prepared properly. Besides, you have no gifts even being invited home. It's just bad manners. You knew you were meeting us, you should have taken care of all of these. Oh, dear, why don't you leave my son and go home today?" That's what she said during my first visit to my in-laws' house before our marriage, and being still young, I turned pale with fear. Although I told her about the schedule to visit beforehand, indeed, I should have brought some gifts to meet Evely for the first time at her house. Feeling embarrassed and frustrated at being seen through, I remained downcast for a while. It was my fault for the etiquette breach, but if Evelyn had been a bit more restrained in her words, I wouldn't have been so upset. Because of my failure, I was virtually separated from Scott and had to return home alone from my first visit to my in-laws, leading to a phone call from Scott later. Mommy was nervous and ended up being a bit harsh. "She actually likes you, Kristen, so don't worry. She approves of our marriage and really wants you to visit again." At that moment, I was infuriated by his optimistic tone. He didn't advise me before visiting her house and wouldn't stop Evelyn when she insulted me right in front of him. Her wanting me to visit again was undoubtedly not her true intention. Would marrying him mean being pressured into living together and facing daily harassment? Surprisingly, she made no such suggestions when I decided to marry Scott. However, relieved for only a moment, she began frequently summoning Scott to her house. "Just when you finally graduated from a distant university and got a job locally, you're getting married. I've been so lonely. Why don't you let Kristen have a break and stay with me for a week or so?" Such messages would arrive for Scott, terrifying me. Showing me the message, he asked, "What should we do?" In his place, I called Evelyn right there and then. "I'm sorry for the inconvenience after your kind consideration, but we still haven't finished unpacking and handling paperwork from the move. I think it will be a while before Scott can relax. Sorry." When I said this, "Just unpack by yourself. Don't always rely on my son," she grumbled, but I simply nodded along and ended the call. Her offer to ease my burden was just a pretext, but she wanted her beloved son by her side. My anger rose towards Evelyn for her lack of consideration, even though we were newlyweds, and also towards Scott, who just laughed off the situation and wouldn't say no. According to him, Evelyn has always been like this. Her overprotectiveness worsened after divorcing Scott's father, and she even cried and tried to stop him from going to college. Somehow, he convinced her and went, but they kept in constant contact through messages and calls. He trusts his mother, who raised him as a single parent, so their relationship has always been good, as I knew from our dating days. It's great to be caring towards a child and a mother, but as adults, there should be a proper distance. However, this closeness was normal for them, and I knew it wasn't right to interfere in another family's dynamics. If it weren't for this, Scott, who is serious about both work and house chores and has a good personality, would have been perfect, so I tried to accept it. But it wasn't long before I couldn't overlook the excessive closeness between the two. One holiday, when Scott usually sleeps till noon, he woke up earlier than me and started preparing to go out. Did we have plans to go somewhere today? I asked. I'm going out shopping with Mommy, so you can stay and sleep. And he replied unbelievably. Apparently, Evelyn wanted to buy clothes and asked him for his opinion. Angry at his willingness to go, we have a day off together for the first time in a while, let's do something. I controlled my emotions and suggested, but Scott shook his head. I'd like that, but I've already promised Mommy, and she seems to be waiting outside. Shocked by his words, I went to the entrance in my pajamas. Looking out the window, I saw Evelyn's bright red car parked in the yard. Noticing my gaze, Evelyn got out of her car, smirking, with her bright red lipstick. Scott, you're late. Oh, Kristen is still asleep? Such a lazy wife for my son. Maybe I should buy you an alarm clock as a souvenir? Mocking me, she affectionately took Scott's hand and led him to the passenger seat. I was dumbfounded by their close relationship and could only watch Evelyn's car drive away swiftly. After this incident, Scott's behavior began to change gradually. He hardly did any housework he used to do routinely and often went to his mother's house almost every weekend. His attitude towards me changed too, becoming more demanding. Kristen, you're too lazy. If I'm off, you just sleep along. Can you call that fulfilling your duties as a housewife? You don't even put on makeup when you're at home. It's not good to slack off just because you're a wife. Mommy is worried about you too. Why don't you visit her alone sometime? I didn't know what Evelyn was saying about me, but his agreement was troubling. He had never mentioned napping or makeup during our relationship. But as he said, perhaps Evelyn was genuinely concerned about my behavior. I tried to convince myself of this multiple times, but knowing Evelyn's behavior towards Scott, it seemed more like harassment. I thought Evelyn's curse would change once we had a child. Soon after my doubts about Scott began, I discovered I was pregnant. He was thrilled, promising to support me. But Evelyn's harassment intensified. Summoning Scott for trivial tasks like shopping, doctor visits, and cleaning her house, effectively leaving me alone. When I explained Evelyn's malicious intentions to him, it backfired. Suddenly, he became infuriated and said, "Every time Mommy sees you, she talks about you. How you should go back to your parents' house, or how you need time alone. Getting angry over such things will affect the baby in your womb. Just indulge in Mommy's feelings." He began leaving me alone more often. As time passed, my morning sickness worsened, and I told him I wanted him to stay with me as much as possible because I felt uneasy being alone. But Scott replied, "What can I do even if I'm with you? Mommy also wanted to be alone during her pregnancy, didn't even want to see Dad's face." He wouldn't listen to anything I said. Feeling physically and mentally unstable, I lost the energy to argue back and resolved to fight this battle alone. Then, one day, while Scott and I were shopping for baby items, we bumped into his colleague who said to me, "Scott, I heard you've been actively attending parenting classes. Your home bookshelf is filled with parenting books, right? Accompanying your wife for shopping today, you're going to be a great dad for sure. Can't wait for your child to be born." Shocked, "Huh?" I blurted out. Scott quickly intervened, "Please stop," laughing off in a joking manner. Turns out, Scott had been pretending at work to be an attentive new father, even fabricating stories. I kept silent about this to his colleague to avoid any trouble, but felt a rising anger inside. Still, he continued to prioritize his time with Evelyn, and whenever I met his colleagues, "Your wife has caught herself an ideal husband," they would say. Such incidents gradually made me distrust his actions and words. I can't say for sure if this stress was the cause, but one weekend, while preparing lunch, I noticed my pants were wet. A thought crossed my mind, and I rushed to the bathroom. As I suspected, my water had broken. I yelled towards the room where Scott was still sleeping, telling him to get the car ready immediately. He, still groggy, became anxious upon hearing about the water break and supported me as I walked. The nurses had repeatedly told us to come to the hospital immediately if my water broke, as there could be urgent risks. Scott, slightly panicked, helped me into the car amidst my contractions. Just as we started driving, his mobile phone rang. Unable to answer while driving, I glanced at the screen while struggling with the pain. Seeing Evelyn's name, I had a bad feeling. The phone kept ringing, and after staring at the screen for a while, I reluctantly answered. "Scott, where are you? It's Wednesday, the day of my sewing class. Did you forget?" Her flirting voice terrified me, but I explained to her. "Evelyn, actually, my water just broke, and Scott is taking me to the hospital right now." As soon as I spoke, Evelyn yelled as if she was a different person. "That's your problem, isn't it? I don't care. Using Scott, who's resting, as a taxi is quite a position you're in. Let me talk to Scott. Today is my regular sewing class day, and I have a prior appointment." I was speechless at her disregard, even for her grandchild's well-being. Her shrill voice continued to echo, even as I remained silent. "Sorry, Kristen," Scott muttered. For a moment, I thought he was apologizing for Evelyn yelling at me. But then I realized Scott had walked around to the back seat where I was lying and opened the door. Confused and enduring the pain, I was stunned. Then he said, "I had promised to drive Mommy, so could you take a taxi or an ambulance from here? I'll definitely catch up later, so go ahead." Wait a minute. Are you prioritizing a sewing class over your own child? Since you won't listen to me, please convince Evelyn yourself. The pain is getting worse, hurry. I raised my voice out of desperation, but he, frowning as well, replied, "It's a weekly commitment, can't be helped, right? I'm sorry I forgot to tell you about it. Here's some money, please manage with this." He took out $20 from his wallet and shoved it into my bag. Then he got back in the driver's seat and left without hesitation. I can't believe it. The place where he dropped me off was still close to our house. Concerned about the neighbors seeing me, I hurriedly searched for a taxi company. The amniotic fluid continued to trickle down my legs, and panic set in as I realized the danger to my unborn child. Tears welled up in my eyes as I struggled with the phone, wondering why my baby and I had to suffer like this. "Kristen!" Startled, I turned around and saw a familiar face. "You look terrible. Forget talking, just get in the car." The person got out of their car, gently supported me, and helped me into the back seat. Her husband adjusted the seat and drove. My memory of what followed is hazy. Upon reaching the hospital, I was quickly wheeled in a wheelchair and taken to a prepared room by nurses. The pain was so severe that I was moaning, but I was told there was still time before delivery, so I rested there. The pain was so intense that I nearly lost consciousness, and suddenly, my mobile phone rang. Thinking it might be a callback from a call to my mother during the journey, I was shocked to see it was Scott. Looking at the clock, it was already evening. 3 hours had passed since I left, and in disbelief, I decided not to answer. But as the calls persisted, I answered in irritation. "Kristen, help me. I want you to explain the situation." Not a single word of concern for me, and I had no idea what had happened to him. Help me. That's it. Even if he was being eaten by a crocodile, I had no obligation to help someone who could abandon his own child. "Who do you think you are, saying such things?" I yelled through the phone at him and hung up. Some time later, I went into labor alone. Though I wished for Scott's support, I was better off without a foolish man who couldn't prioritize correctly. Instead, a kind nurse supported me, and by late night, my much-awaited baby was born safely. Exhausted, I fell asleep quickly after the birth. The next morning, a nurse came to my room first thing to tell me that Scott had come. Apparently, he had arrived right after the birth, but seeing how deeply I was sleeping, the nurse kindly sent him away. Honestly, I felt I never needed to see him again. But when he entered the room, looking tired, I couldn't help but ask him what happened. The person who picked me up and took me to the hospital was Misty, an older lady in the neighborhood with whom I was always friendly. She had been like a mother to me, caring for me like her own daughter since I was newly married and insecure. When she asked about Scott in the car, I told her he was taking Evelyn to her hobby class, and she got angry as if it were her own matter. Little did I know that this would end up cornering Scott. After dropping me off, Misty spread the story throughout the neighborhood. Being sociable and always chatting with friends, her influence was significant, and her friends seemed to have confronted Scott en masse. The trouble that he wanted help with was apparently this situation. With that, a huge commotion had formed around our house with many people gathering. As panicked as he was, seeking my help in that situation was clearly a lack of intelligence. I hadn't heard from Evelyn at all, and my mind was already made up. "I'm sorry, but can you leave? I'm not feeling well, and my parents are about to arrive." "Do our parents know about this? I want to apologize. Can I stay?" He spoke in a pitiful, muttering voice. "What are you saying? I don't care about your apologies. I'm busy, so please leave." "Don't say that. Where's the baby? I just want to see her and then I'll go." "Just leave. There are other pregnant women here, so get out." I replied coldly and, as he still stood there, I turned my back, lay down, and covered myself with a blanket. "Hey, I'm sorry. Can you call Mommy for me? I want to send her a picture of the baby. Can I call a nurse?" Unbelievably, Scott reached out and shook me, just as I was about to lose my patience and push him away. "What are you doing? Don't touch her." My parents entered the room. My mother rushed to my side and pushed him away. "How dare you shake someone who just gave birth? And to show up without considering the situation. I'm disappointed in you. Get out now." Her fierceness, which I had never seen before, overwhelmed Scott, and he finally left the room. My father followed him, likely giving Scott a thorough scolding. During my hospital stay, I refused to see him and took the baby back to my parents' house after being discharged. Concerned about him doing something, I initiated the divorce over the phone without meeting him. I told him about the divorce papers to be mailed and the compensation claim, ignoring any objections from him. The compensation was for the scrapes and bruises I got when he forcefully made me get out of the car. He tried to make excuses, but I silenced him by mentioning the testimony of Misty and her husband and the photos of the injuries taken that day. The lawyer said the costs for his malicious actions towards a pregnant woman would be significant. While I was busy with the baby, Evelyn barged into my parents' house once. The rumor spread by Misty persisted, and the neighbor's gaze was cold. She blamed everything on me for not respecting her and her son, but my strict father handled it all. Both Evelyn and Scott were dealt with by my father, making me think it should have been this way from the start. But he said, "The head of the family doesn't always stand out in the open." He was strangely trying to be cool about it. When I became accustomed to parenting, I invited Misty to my parents' house and introduced her. She quickly became friends with my mother, as they were of the same generation, and we all agreed to keep in touch. During that visit, Misty shared a story she had heard from a friend who works part-time at my ex-husband's company. Her friend, like Misty, loves gossip and apparently let slip the story of Scott to others. This quickly spread and was exaggerated, leading to a decline in his reputation. The contrast between his portrayal as a dedicated new father and the reality had a significant impact, and he resigned from his job, facing cold treatment from his bosses and colleagues. Now in his late 30s, jobless and without qualifications, he became a recluse, living off Evelyn's pension and savings, fearful of the neighbor's judgment. Years later, out of the blue, I received another call from him. "Hey, where are you? I'm in front of your parents' house, but nobody's inside." His first words were curt, so I responded similarly. "Can't you understand? We've moved." "What do you want?" "Moved? Did you use the compensation money I gave you to enjoy yourself? Come back right now, let's start over. Mommy wants to see you too." Your words make no sense. Why would I benefit from going back to you? Still talking about Mommy after all this time? I don't want to hear anything from you, so don't call me again. I hung up without waiting for a reply, and my phone kept lighting up for a while. After finally setting up call blocking, I started receiving messages from him, asking for reconciliation. I read them just in case, but they were all nonsensical, saying things like, "Don't you feel sorry for the child not having a father? It's ungrateful not to let mommy see you after all she's done for you." So, I deleted all the messages and changed my email address. Although what happened was awful, it allowed me to proceed with the divorce advantageously and impose sanctions on him. Having such a worthless person in our lives would be worse for my child. Thinking so, I've been enjoying a relaxed parenting life, supported by my parents, who have become wonderful grandparents.
When my husband is at work, he thinks he's royalty. You get suspicious because you do whatever you want, he accuses. I was trembling with anger at my husband's selfish words. I swore in my heart that I would never forgive him, and that I would get my revenge. My name is Luna. I'm 26 years old. My husband Jackson is 35, and we've been married for 3 years. But I have a problem. It's about Jackson's mother, my mother-in-law, Grace. Grace is oddly suspicious of me having an affair. I know why. Jackson's brother Matthew recently got divorced because of his ex-wife's affair. I've met her a few times, but she never seemed like that kind of person. However, she fell for her affair partner and left Matthew, abandoning their home. Matthew was so shocked by his ex-wife's infidelity that he changed drastically after the divorce. Once cheerful and always smiling, he became withdrawn, not leaving his room for days. He couldn't go to work and was diagnosed with depression at the hospital. Because of that, he had to quit his job, which had been going well. Seeing Matthew's life thrown into chaos because of the affair, Grace became overly worried that Jackson might suffer the same fate. Grace, always a worrier, even had me investigated before we got married. She hired a detective agency to look into my background. I found out when friends and colleagues at work told me strangers were asking about me. I was perplexed to learn I was being investigated behind my back, but my desire to marry Jackson was so strong that I didn't pay much attention to it. But with the recent divorce drama of my brother-in-law, Grace started openly suspecting me. "Luna, you got home after 10 p.m. yesterday. What were you doing out so late?" She would ask such things abruptly when I visited my husband's family without even a greeting. I wondered how she knew, but I was working late. I'm handling a big project right now, so I often get home late, I answered. "Can anyone at your company confirm that? Is it okay if I check with them?" Grace asked something so absurd. "Please don't ask my colleagues. It would be a hassle for them." "Well, if that's the case, it can't be helped. Nowadays, you can track someone's location with their cell phone. Set up your phone so I can see your location on my mobile." She kept making unreasonable demands. Normally, I would refuse outright, but I was worried she might really contact my workplace. I had nothing to hide, and if it would keep her quiet, I reluctantly shared my location with Grace, without giving it much thought. However, this turned into a huge hassle. Grace began calling me frequently, even during work hours, whenever I stepped away from the office. "Luna, you're not at your company. What are you doing?" "What do you mean, Grace? I'm working. I'm heading to an important meeting with a client right now." "Really? Isn't that the area known for its busy streets? Are you sure you're not meeting an affair partner under the guise of work?" "The client's office is nearby. I have to go. I'm almost there." This kind of exchange happened over and over. Unable to bear it any longer, I spoke to my husband Jackson about it. "Jackson, you need to do something about Grace. She calls and sends WhatsApp messages nonstop, even when I'm working." "Grace is distressed about Matthew. You know what he went through. Cut her some slack, will you?" He replied dismissively. Meanwhile, Grace's behavior escalated further. One day, I had some free time during a business meeting, so I was discussing the deal with my boss at a cafe in a nearby business hotel. My boss, while looking at the documents, suddenly reeled back in surprise. I turned around to see an enraged Grace standing there. "Luna, are you on a date here under the pretext of work?" She glanced at my boss's ring. "Well, well, the other person is married too. What are two married people doing together?" She said loudly. "What are you talking about, Grace? This person is my boss. We're having a meeting before meeting with our client." I hastily replied and managed to send Grace away. After apologizing profusely to my boss, I somehow managed to defuse the situation, but I was at my limit. When I got home, Jackson was already there, watching TV. I told him about what happened. Jackson said, "Grace jumped to conclusions, huh? That's unfortunate. But don't get upset over every little thing like this." He responded nonchalantly, "It's not just me. She's causing trouble for my boss, too. It's really a problem. Please talk to Grace about it, Jackson." But he was unhelpful. "You just need to be careful not to arouse suspicion. Then Grace will eventually calm down." He refused to take it seriously. After that incident, Grace became even harsher towards me, constantly suspecting something between my boss and me. No matter how many times I appealed to Jackson, he showed no signs of taking action. Due to Grace's behavior, arguments with my husband increased, and our marriage started to deteriorate. Jackson, perhaps to avoid my frustration, started working late and often didn't come home until midnight. He would have dinner outside, and began saying he had business trips on weekends, making it difficult for us to spend time together. Despite all this, the baseless suspicions from Grace didn't stop, and the relentless questioning continued. One day, seeing how tired I looked from Grace's baseless accusations, my best friend since college and colleague at work, Aria, invited me out for lunch. "Luna, are you okay? You seem really exhausted lately," she asked with concern as soon as we sat down. "It's really become a problem." I started and told Aria about what was happening. "Wow, that's tough. I remember Grace investigated you before your marriage, too. These continuous days would wear anyone down. Hey, since your husband's away on a business trip, why don't we go on a trip for a change of scenery?" "A trip? Huh. Actually, there's a famous love shrine I've always wanted to visit. Let's spend a night and enjoy some good food," Aria suggested. Indeed, staying at home only meant getting drained by Grace's constant calls, even for a short outing. So I decided to take up Aria's offer for an overnight trip over the weekend. I informed Grace in advance that I'd be traveling with a female friend. First, we headed to the Love Shrine, famous for matchmaking, Aria's main destination. It was a popular spot, bustling with couples. While looking at the wishes written on paper, "Luna, look at this." Aria called me over. Next to her, she pointed at a piece of paper. It read, "I hope my beloved leaves his wife soon so we can be together." Typical of a spot known for fulfilling romantic wishes, it seemed to attract various kinds of couples. "So many people like this in the world. No wonder Luna's mother-in-law is so paranoid," Aria murmured. "Ah, the person who wrote this over there?" She pointed, and I couldn't believe what I saw and instinctively hid. "What's wrong?" Aria was surprised by my sudden move. "Jackson." "What?" "The person with the one who wrote that paper? It's Jackson." "What?" There was no mistaking my husband. That was definitely Jackson. Arm in arm with another woman, completely oblivious to our presence. "Wait, Jackson's supposed to be on a business trip, right? I'll go check." Aria, clearly confused, was about to confront Jackson. I grabbed her arm, stopping her. "Well, if he's lying about a business trip, and he is here with another woman, it's clear, even if I don't want to admit it. But if we confront him now, he'll just make excuses. Whether we're getting back together or separating, we need to hold him accountable. We need evidence." Though I was shocked, I calmed down Arya, who was even more affected. Evidence. Muttering this, Arya began to take pictures of the two with her smartphone. Let's follow them. If we can get a picture of them entering a hotel, it'll be even stronger evidence. Arya then looked at me worriedly. Sorry, I got a bit carried away. I just can't stand to see you look like this, Luna. You can go back to the inn first if you don't want to see this. I felt a warm surge of gratitude and reassurance for Arya's kindness. Thanks, Arya, but I'm okay. I want to see it with my own eyes. Resolved, Arya and I followed Jackson and the woman, capturing the moment they cozily entered a hotel arm in arm on our mobile phones. This was indisputably an affair. The next night, when Jackson returned from his trip, I casually probed him. Welcome back. How was your business trip? Where did you go? To the neighboring state. Why ask? Doesn't matter where I went. I'm exhausted from working for 2 straight days. What did you do over the weekend? I went on an overnight trip with Arya. A trip? Huh, must be nice to do that while your husband's working. No wonder Grace suspects you. I'm tired. I'm going to take a shower. With those unbelievable words, Jackson headed to the bathroom. Unbelievable. He doesn't mention his own affair, but blames me instead. My anger reached its peak. Ah, I see. So he hadn't stopped Grace's attacks on me to keep the focus off himself. Seeing Jackson's attitude, any thought of reconciling with him disappeared. But I couldn't let my anger out now. Before thinking about divorce, I needed more evidence to turn things in my favor. I decided to start my revenge against Jackson. First, I told Arya about it. So you decided to leave him. I support your decision, Luna. I'll send you the photos we took at the shrine. Having Arya's support felt incredibly empowering. Thank you. I expressed my heartfelt gratitude. Then I began to gather solid evidence of Jackson's affair. Unaware that I was onto him, Jackson was quite careless. His phone wasn't locked, and their WhatsApp exchanges were full of incriminating evidence. They had also exchanged numerous photos, and I was able to figure out the woman's identity and address. With solid evidence in hand, I pondered my next move. Meanwhile, Jackson, oblivious to my actions, approached me. We're gathering at my parents' house for Christmas this year. Get ready for that. Understood. Oh, and I have work on Christmas, so I'll probably stay at the office. I'll head directly to my parents' house the next day around noon. How effortlessly he lied. So he was planning to spend Christmas with her. As I thought about this, with a detached feeling. Hey, are you listening? Don't laze around just because I'm not there on Christmas. As usual, send out Christmas cards with both our names. Jackson ordered arrogantly. That's it, I realized. The perfect revenge. Of course, I'll write and send out the Christmas cards with our names on them, I replied. I put extra effort into the Christmas cards and mailed them. Having done what needed to be done, I felt relieved as Christmas approached. The next day, I visited Jackson's parents' house around noon, expecting him to have arrived. When I got there, the house was in an uproar. Seeing me, Jackson confronted me loudly. What the hell is this Christmas card about? He had seen the card I made. What do you mean? I just properly informed Grace and the others about your activities. I answered calmly. I had included a photo of Jackson cozying up with his mistress and a screenshot of their WhatsApp conversation, expressing love and future plans. You betrayed Luna and had an affair. It was you all along. Grace exploded in anger. Matthew, too, was furious with Jackson. Knowing how much I suffered from my ex-wife's affair, you did the same thing to Luna. You're the lowest. He looked ready to hit Jackson. No, that's not true. It's a misunderstanding. The woman is a junior colleague, nothing more. Jackson desperately tried to calm Grace and Matthew. Luna, doing this kind of payback just because you're suspected is in poor taste. He continued. I see. He still won't admit it, but I was prepared. I laid out all the evidence I'd collected on the table. Then maybe you'd like to explain all this evidence. The family looked shocked at the evidence displayed. So the affair is true. What have you done? Grace said coldly. I thought you knew how much I detest infidelity. You've betrayed not just Luna, but our entire family. You're no son of mine. Don't ever step foot in this house again. She continued. Grace then apologized to me. Luna, I'm so sorry. I've been terribly suspicious of you since Matthew's incident. I should have doubted my own son. I'm ashamed as a parent. Sorry. It's okay. I'm glad the misunderstanding is cleared up in the end, I replied. In the end, Jackson muttered, looking at me. I then presented him with the divorce papers. We're separating right now. I'll be claiming a fair compensation in the divorce court. There's plenty of evidence, and you have no right to refuse. To my surprise, Jackson was defiant. Grace, Luna, do whatever you want. I was planning to divorce Luna and be with her anyway. She's way richer than our family, so being disowned doesn't bother me at all. While Jackson was saying this, he began calling his mistress Harper. Yeah, it's me. Be happy. I just got divorced. Now we can be together whenever. Harper's loud voice, audible to us all, shouted in response. What are you talking about, Jackson? What have you done? Because of the Christmas card you sent, I'm in big trouble. My parents are furious and say they'll disown me if I don't break up with you. What are you going to do about this? Jackson glared at me as he heard her scream. Indeed, I had sent the same Christmas card to Harper's house too. That's right, as you guessed, I sent Harper's family the same Christmas card. Since it was from both of us, I'm sure her parents got the message, I explained. It seemed Jackson and his mistress planned to rely on her parents' support for their future life. Jackson had apparently told her parents he was already divorced. Learning their relationship was an affair, her parents were understandably enraged. My life's in jeopardy, not to mention the marriage. I'm not going to break ties with my parents just to be with you. Don't contact me ever again. With that, Harper hung up. Jackson, dumped by the mistress he thought he would be with, suddenly changed his tune. Young women are no good. Looks like Luna's the only one for me, he muttered conveniently. You seem to be misunderstanding something. Even if you're okay with it, I'm not. I have no intention of getting back with a cheater like you. Just sign the divorce papers quickly. I rejected him. Jackson, urged by his family, signed the divorce papers and handed them to me, downcast. Then I told him, You're not the only one who received this Christmas card. It'll be interesting to see you go back to work after the holidays. When I said that, What do you mean? I heard my husband's voice behind me as I left his parents' house. Jackson later discovered the full extent of my revenge. I had sent the same Christmas cards to all the company contacts Jackson had exchanged with, just like the ones sent to our families. The Christmas card became the talk of the company. Due to this, Jackson, recently promoted to director, was demoted, derailing his career. Losing credibility in his job, he now faced uncertain days, possibly being on the list for layoffs. On top of that, with the compensation for the divorce leaving him financially strained, the demotion and reduced salary would only make his life harder. But as a divorced woman, that was no longer my concern. To avoid the hassle of dealing with everything myself, I left all the proceedings to a lawyer and refused any contact with Jackson. Thanks to fairly dividing our savings, I was able to move out immediately after the divorce. This freed me from any ties with Jackson, leaving me feeling incredibly relieved and clear-headed. Having completed all the procedures, I took Arya out for a meal to express my gratitude. Everything's finally over. Thanks so much for your help, Arya. Luna, you did great. I never thought you'd go this far for revenge, but they say even the nicest people can be scary when they're angry, Arya said, and we both laughed. Hi, Luna. As a reward for all this, let's go on a revenge trip. A revenge trip? Yes, back to that matchmaking shrine. Last time we couldn't really make our wishes because of everything going on. Thanks to that, I'm still single. Arya joked, puffing her cheeks. Indeed, the paper written by Jackson's mistress wished for Jackson and me to split so she could be with him, a wish that, in a way, was half fulfilled. In that sense, the shrine might actually have some power. I laughed at the thought. Luna, what are you laughing about? Arya asked. Nothing, I replied, and we began planning our trip.
Mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws are strangers. We don't interact except at weddings and funerals. Dale, my daughter's fiancé, said with a smile during the family meeting for her wedding. What do you mean by that, Dale? In your family and mine, we live in different worlds. Dale suddenly raised his voice at Mimi. That's right, Mimi. Mother-in-law? I was actually against welcoming you as a wife. Misty, Dale's mother, began with a weary tone. What? Mimi seemed shocked. I only agreed to this marriage because Dale insisted. You're right, Mom. We can't depend on Mimi for financial support. They're poor, Dale added. Mimi was dumbfounded. My husband furrowed his brows, looking puzzled. Understood. Mom? Mimi looked at me as if questioning my response. We'll also maintain our distance as strangers, not just at weddings and funerals. We won't interact at all, I stated firmly. My name is Elise, 61 years old, nearing retirement age. I used to work for a major company, but now run a small business with my husband, Tyler, a former colleague. We're thriving, and it's reassuring to work together. Our daughter, Mimi, is our beloved only child. Busy with work, we could only spend rare days off with her. Sometimes I had to multitask with work calls, even then. Yet Mimi always clung to me since she was little. When I was down about a mistake at work, she would pat my head with her small hands, asking, Are you okay, Mom? Although busy, I'm grateful she grew up to be a considerate and kind child. After Mimi started working, she introduced us to Dale. My first impression of Dale was of a refreshing, good-natured young man. He and Mimi worked at the same company, in a supervisor-subordinate relationship. They started dating after he encouraged her through a work mistake. Dale was a handsome, modern-looking young man. He came to greet us in a suit, which was formal but somehow stylish. His way of speaking was fine, too. He gave us the impression of being considerate, asking things like, How do Elise and Tyler usually spend their weekends? I've decided to get married. One day, out of the blue, Mimi announced. The guy she's talking about is Dale, who she introduced recently. My husband and I were quite surprised by the sudden news. It was unexpected because Dale didn't mention marriage during his last visit. Back then, Mimi only said they were considering their future, so this sudden development left us baffled. Mimi said, At first I thought it was too soon for marriage. We've been dating just about a year. But Dale kept saying, Let's get married, after 6 months of dating, and I felt so needed. It seemed she was won over by Dale's persistence. Yet, while saying this, Mimi looked genuinely happy with a bright smile. My husband also seemed thrilled, saying, I've always dreamed of going fishing with my son-in-law, his joy visibly apparent. However, one thing bothered me. Dale hadn't been in touch for a while after that. I thought if he really wanted to marry Mimi, he should have come to greet us right away. When my husband proposed to me, he immediately discussed visiting my parents and came in a neatly tailored suit. But Dale hadn't done anything like that. I wondered, is this how all young people are these days? By the way, Elise and Tyler, where do you work? Dale asked today as he came with Mimi for the first time in a while to report about their marriage. It seems Mimi had asked Dale to report their marriage to us parents. In the middle of our casual conversation, Dale suddenly inquired, We run our own business, so we're not employed by anyone, I answered without any trouble. Does that mean you're the boss? Wow, that's impressive. Dale seemed a bit surprised. No, it's nothing grand. We're not running a company, just doing some small work on our own, I modestly replied. Does that mean you don't have any other employees? Dale looked even more astonished. Yeah, it's just the two of us handling small-scale work, I said. Suddenly, Dale's expression turned sly and slightly malicious. Wow, that must be tough. Can you even make a decent living with that? Dale's change in demeanor surprised me. Not just me, but my husband and Mimi were also taken aback. We managed to make enough not to struggle with our basic needs, I answered calmly, though surprised. No way. Making ends meet through small-scale work must be tough. Wouldn't it be better to get a proper job at a company? I bet your income is low and life is a struggle, right? Dale said. Hey, Dale! Mimi interjected, looking startled. No, Mimi, you should understand this too. Being employed at a proper company and becoming a high-income earner like me or my dad, that's normal, Dale said, looking smug. Mimi argued back, not backing down. That's not true. Any job can be great if you take pride in it. Being a company employee isn't everything. Well, Mimi, being raised by Elise and Tyler who run a small business, this might be hard for you to understand. Sorry, Dale said, laughing it off. My husband frowned and Mimi kept apologizing with a guilty face. I felt quite upset by Dale's attitude. Then, on the day of the family meeting for the wedding, we met Dale again, who hadn't apologized since his disrespectful marriage announcement. No apologies came through Mimi either. Mom, Dad, I'm really sorry, Mimi said, looking pained at the entrance of the restaurant where the family meeting was held. But Dale and his mother, Misty, stood next to her, smirking without a hint of apology. In contrast, Dale's father, Dom, was silent, almost invisible. Thank you for your time today, Mimi politely thanked Dale's parents. No problem. Dale insisted. You should be thanking us, Misty said with a nasty smile, making Mimi's face tense. Misty's condescending attitude was clearly off-putting. The meal as a family began. Mimi tried to initiate conversation, but Dale only gave vague responses. Misty laughed in a way that seemed to look down on us. Then Dale suddenly said, Mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws are strangers. We don't interact except at weddings and funerals. What do you mean, Dale? Mimi asked in shock. It means exactly what I said. In your family and mine, we live in different worlds. Dale raised his voice at Mimi. That's right, Mimi. Mother-in-law? I was actually against welcoming you as a wife. Misty started, sounding resigned. What? Mimi seemed deeply shocked. Dale insisted on the marriage, so I reluctantly gave my permission. Misty, Dale's mother, said. That's right. Mimi's family is poor, so it would be troublesome if they relied on us financially, Dale added. Elise and Tyler run a small, unstable business, right? My family is different. My dad has a high-ranking position in a top-tier company, and honestly, we're not struggling with money, Dale continued while his mother laughed along. Your family and ours are different. Even if you married Dale for his money, don't expect us to take care of your family's financial problems. You should be grateful we even allowed this marriage. Such a thing. Mimi stood dumbfounded, her face turning pale. Understood, I said quietly. Mom? Mimi looked at me, her eyes brimming with tears, on the verge of crying. We'll also maintain our distance, not just at weddings and funerals, but in all matters. We'd prefer if you also refrain from involving yourself with our family in the future, I said firmly. Of course. I don't want to be associated with bottom-tier jobs like Elise and Tyler's, Dale said, laughing as if it was obvious. Oh, Dale, you shouldn't say the truth like that. Misty laughed, looking at Dale. Mom? A tear rolled down Mimi's cheek. Today was the wedding day. I had repeatedly advised Mimi to call off the wedding, but she refused, and her reason was shocking. Dale is threatening me. I want to continue at my current job, but Dale said if I break off the engagement, he'll spread lies about me at work. Dale's true colors were finally evident to Mimi. He was not only Mimi's superior, but highly trusted by others. He seemed to be wearing multiple masks of deception. Apparently, he was popular with women and his colleagues envied his marriage. But that was only until today. Today, I planned to bring Dale down to rock bottom. The wedding ceremony went smoothly, and it was time for the reception to begin. Mimi entered with Dale, her smile strained. She seemed to be forcing herself, and my husband looked worriedly at her. Oblivious to Mimi's struggle, Dale was waving cheerfully at the company executives, colleagues, and subordinates he invited to the reception. Then the moment finally arrived. The host announced, "Now we will have a toast by the bride's mother, Elise." Applause erupted instantly. Dale and Mimi's colleagues from their company clapped, smiling at us. "Thank you for gathering here today, as the mother of the bride and the co-owner of a law firm." Yes, I actually run a law firm with my husband. Originally, I held a position in a major law corporation, but I decided to start my own firm and do things my way. It turned out to be a great success. Though we handle fewer cases as a duo, we have many high-profile clients, including listed and famous companies, thanks to referrals from my previous firm. In fact, I had some connections with executives from Dale and Mimi's company due to my past job. That's why I had explained the situation to the company's executives in advance and invited them to the reception. When I mentioned being a lawyer, Dale was visibly shocked, likely because it was not the job he expected. Misty, Dale's mother, had an amusingly distorted smile. Dale confronted Mimi. "Wait, Elise and Tyler are almost incomeless with their shabby jobs, right?" Upon hearing that my husband and I were lawyers, Misty, recalling her previous rude behavior, looked pale. Then the entertainment segment began. We planned to show a video, and I had already informed the reception staff about it. I specialize in cases involving victims of infidelity. Due to my profession, I always make sure to record anything significant for potential evidence. Of course, the video that played was from the family meeting day. Of course, I don't want to be associated with bottom-tier jobs like Elise and Tyler's. "Oh, Dale, you shouldn't say the truth like that." Dale's laughter and his mother's loud guffaws played in the video. Contrasting the video, Dale yelled, "What's this about? Mimi, stop it now." Misty was desperately trying to cover up, telling Dale's relatives, "It was just a joke, merely part of the entertainment." My husband commented loudly, "Amazing how they think that's entertainment," making Misty turn from pale to white. The condescending remarks they made about us blasted through the speakers, embarrassing Dale and his mother. I also had footage of Dale visiting hotels with women other than Mimi, which I played next. A detective who works with our law firm had helped gather this evidence. Dale, apparently not satisfied with just Mimi, was seen with various women. Given his good looks, he had no trouble with his escapades. The video showed different women each time, indicating numerous affairs. Some of the footage was definitely not suitable for a wedding reception, eliciting screams of shock and confusion, especially from the female colleagues at his company. Eventually, the reception was abruptly called off. With his true character and infidelity exposed, Dale's social standing was undoubtedly ruined. Moreover, not only colleagues but also the upper management of his company were present, including some from human resources. One of the executives, as he was leaving, sternly told Dale, "I'm disappointed in you. We will discuss this matter in a company meeting. Be prepared for the consequences regarding your future in the company." Dale, turning pale, weakly replied, "Yes." It seemed Dale's mother had fainted midway through the ordeal. The reception hall buzzed with whispers and stares at the two of them. Dale's relatives were quietly discussing how to handle the situation. I overheard someone muttering, "Just like his mother, Dale has the worst personality." It appeared that Dale's misconduct wasn't entirely hidden from his relatives. None of Mimi's colleagues even tried to make eye contact with Dale. Some of Dale's batchmates, whom he had invited, looked at him with contempt and quietly left the reception early. Dale, who had been popular until then, often received Valentine chocolates and coffee from female colleagues, apparently treated quite favorably. But now the situation had changed. The women at the reception viewed Dale as an enemy, and one particularly influential woman among them seemed ready to get involved with Dale, but in a negative way. As expected, Mimi and Dale's marriage was called off. Since they planned to register the marriage after the ceremony, Mimi's family registry remained untarnished. Given Dale's affairs during their relationship, we decided to demand a substantial sum for damages, including wedding expenses. It was a small price to pay, considering Mimi's feelings. According to the detective I know, Dale had spent most of his savings on his affairs, leaving him with little for the compensation. He would struggle to arrange the settlement. Surprisingly, it was Dale's previously indifferent father who reacted. Triggered by the incident, Dale's parents apparently divorced. His father had quietly visited my husband and me before the wedding, apologizing for the family meeting day and hinting at a divorce. We had given him some heartfelt advice. Initially, Dale's father approached us, unaware that my husband and I were lawyers, saying, "I'm thinking of divorcing my wife." He seemed quite surprised when he found out about our profession. He was evidently troubled by Dale's arrogance, his mother's nasty nature, and her extravagant spending habits. We had a thorough conversation with Dale's father before the reception, agreeing to keep our professions and the entire plan a secret. Eventually, Dale's mother's flamboyant spending on hosts and designer bags, leading to a near penniless state, became the final straw in their divorce. According to Dale's father, they had almost depleted their savings, so the divorce was somewhat inevitable. Now, Dale and his mother are living together, and rumor has it they are constantly quarreling. Dale was demoted and transferred to a remote branch office with only one employee, a decision made immediately after the reception. When I spoke to the executives at Dale's company who helped us, it turned out that Dale's new location is typically what's referred to as a layoff room. Dale repeatedly called me after his transfer, apparently realizing that I had connections with the company executives and could potentially influence his career. "You are actually amazing people, right? If only you had told me earlier that you were doing such respectable jobs, I wouldn't have acted that way. Isn't this partly your fault too? Please, talk to the executives so I can get a promotion." I was appalled at Dale's nerve to call me with such requests and surprised that he still thought I could influence his promotion. "Dale, remember what you said? Mother-in-laws and daughter-in-laws are strangers. We don't interact except at weddings and funerals. You and your mother are now complete strangers to us. Whatever happens to you is none of our concern. We have no intention of ever interacting with you again," I told him. I also warned him that if he continued to call, I would involve the police. It's puzzling how someone with such a delusional mindset like Dale could have been so well regarded. Even with a good-looking face, his other qualities were far too negative. He must have deceived everyone with his charming smile. Mimi was ambushed several times by Dale before his transfer, begging her to reconsider their relationship. Despite his deep apologies, Mimi elegantly ignored him. After being treated so horribly, it's only natural she wouldn't want anything to do with him. Repeatedly, Dale's mother also called and wrote letters saying, "Please reconsider with Dale." Desperate because her only source of income was her beloved son, she was relentless. Of course, we firmly refused any contact with Dale's mother. Regarding the phone calls, my husband firmly said, "Could you please not rely on our family? After all, we are complete strangers to you. Besides, since you think of us as poor, you shouldn't need our help, right?" He then forcefully hung up the receiver. He also tore up the letters, clearly very upset by the whole situation. Of course, we consulted with the executives of Dale and Mimi's company about this matter. They assured us that they would handle it well, which was a relief. Dale's situation might become worse than just being relegated to a layoff room. He's completely off the elite track now, and it's even uncertain if he can stay in the company at all. Well, it's all a result of his own actions. As long as he can earn enough to cover the compensation, that's all that matters. Mimi went through a lot, but she eventually recovered. Perhaps because of what happened, her colleagues were sympathetic and supportive. Having connections with the company's executives through me also seemed to play a significant role. The executives regularly checked in on Mimi, so she didn't face any bad rumors or defamation at work. Being diligent at her job, Mimi is considered a promising employee, and a promotion isn't out of reach. 5 years have passed since then. After the incident, Mimi fell in love with someone she met through a business deal and eventually married. Now she's the mother of a lovely 3-year-old boy and a 1-year-old girl. Her husband, not only serious and devoted, but also more handsome than Dale, is a doting father, always looking after the kids. Mimi often brings her children over, and my husband and I love spending time with our grandchildren. We also have a good relationship with her husband's parents, and frequent family meetings are held. Looking ahead, I plan to lead a busy but fulfilling life, balancing work and family time with my grandchildren.
Terrible, Christy. What have I ever done to you? I don't need you anymore. I'm going to live with Mom, so pack your bags and get out. Cutting off my words, my mother-in-law and husband said that. They had no intention of listening to me. I felt my feelings for them cooling. I'm Christy, 27 years old. I've been married to Albert for 1.5 years. Albert can be indecisive, but I thought it might be better to be with a more docile person every day, so I decided to marry him. We're a dual-income couple, and we've been cooperating and getting along well. Then the incident happened right after the New Year. The signal for the start of the incident was the doorbell that rang at 7 a.m. on Sunday. We, as a dual-income couple, are still asleep at 7 a.m. on Sundays. We're too tired from the weekdays to wake up easily. But we finally gave in to the persistent doorbell, ringing again and again. Hello, who is it? I looked at the monitor with sleepy eyes and a groggy voice. There stood my mother-in-law, Greta. Christy, why have you made me wait so long? What? Huh? What, Greta? Greta's cries echoed early in the morning. Shocked, I woke up Albert. I hurried Albert, who was still half asleep, and we opened the front door in our pajamas. Mom, what's going on this early in the morning? Albert, help me, please, I've been thrown out. Saying that, Greta cried even louder. Come in for now. Greta sat down in the middle of the 3-seater sofa once inside. What happened, Mom? Did you fight with Becky? We didn't fight. Becky unilaterally kicked me out. Becky is the wife of Albert's brother, Ken. Greta lives with Ken and Becky. I made the excuse of preparing tea for 3 to escape to the kitchen. What does it mean that Greta was kicked out of Ken and Becky's house? I listened while waiting for the kettle to boil. They always said I made the utility bills high, or they didn't like the taste of my cooking. It's been like that ever since we started living together. Terrible, isn't it? Greta sure is energetic this morning. Her endless complaints keep coming. I sighed deeply. Actually, Greta and I don't get along very well. We just don't click. If I choose right, Greta chooses left. If I say something is good, she says it's bad. It's like that in everything. Greta, Ken, and Becky were already living together when Albert and I got married, so I was relieved that I wouldn't have to live with Greta. But this was a bolt from the blue. I never expected Greta to be kicked out and come to our house. This morning I finally couldn't stand it and talked back, and then they told me to get out. I'm so sad and ashamed. I thought Becky wasn't that unreasonable, but is it true? Tea's ready. Thank you, Christy. You're on my side, right? Great. I have nowhere else to go. Please let me stay here. What? I really struggle with Greta's habit of unilaterally deciding things. I had a hard time at our wedding because of this. She decided on the wedding cake and dress on her own. Don't decide on your own. It's our wedding, Albert's and mine. And since Greta and I have opposite tastes, none of it matched what I had in mind. I had a tough time convincing Greta not to create a fuss and changing things to match our wishes. Bitter memories. Even after getting married, she makes plans without considering our convenience. We had to reschedule or adjust work because of her. I have common sense, you know. I wouldn't dream of taking Christy's room. I'll just borrow a little space in Albert's room, so don't worry. No, no, no. Common sense, really? And live here. This is all so sudden. Our home is a 2-bedroom, company-owned house. Albert and I each have our own room. There's no spare room. Even if she borrows part of Albert's room, our house is small. It was inevitable that problems would arise immediately. Is she really going to settle here? Greta? A crazy thing happened on a Sunday morning. After breakfast, Greta holed up in Albert's room. Albert went into his room to listen to Greta's story. I sighed deeply while cleaning up after the breakfast for 3. First, I decided to talk to Becky. Since Albert is listening to Greta, I'll leave that to him. I need to understand the situation by combining both sides of the story. Albert, Greta, I'm going out to do some shopping for lunch. I called out from the living room, and Albert and Greta showed their faces from the door. Take care. Be careful, Christy. Okay. 2 similar faces peeked out from the door. They really are mother and son, I thought again. I went shopping and stopped at the park to call Becky. I had emailed her before leaving the house, so Becky answered quickly. Christy, are you okay? Greta must be causing trouble, right? Becky started with that. Becky, are you feeling mentally drained? It's Ken who's suffering more. Ken? Huh? Ken, who Greta never mentioned, is struggling? What does that mean? What did Greta tell you? Well, I honestly told Becky everything I heard from Greta. Then Becky, with a serious tone, said, I thought as much. Don't believe what Greta says, Christy. Becky's story went like this. Before living together, Greta, Ken, and Becky had discussed how much money each would contribute to the household monthly. But that only lasted a few months. Greta stopped contributing money at all. Ken repeatedly asked Greta to stick to the agreement, but she wouldn't listen. Greta had quit her job unexpectedly. Then she began taking money that Becky left at home for expenses, including food and the kids' ballet class fees. When Becky protested, Greta played the victim. The situation had actually been going on for a while. Albert and I had no idea. Ken and Becky started avoiding leaving money at home. Proud Greta didn't ask Ken and Becky for money, managing with her savings and pension. Then Albert got involved. We had given Greta some money, saying he won big in gambling. That's when things changed. Greta started belittling her eldest son and praising her youngest. And this morning, I'm fed up with this awful life. Albert will treat me better. Greta stormed into Ken and Becky's bedroom saying that, and then left. That was just before 6 a.m. today. I was puzzled. Greta's story was completely different. Becky advised me worriedly, whatever you do, don't make promises to Greta. Don't believe her. Understood. I ended the call. As I shopped, I compared Greta and Becky's stories. They didn't match at all. What should I believe? For now, I need to talk to Albert. I'm back. When I returned home, Greta and Albert had moved to the living room. They greeted me with smiles. Welcome back. We're going out to buy things Mom needs for living here. You rest, Christy. We'll have lunch out. What? I said I was going out for lunch shopping, right? Eating out. And what does she mean by things for living here? Is she really planning to stay? For how long? Not forever, right? Then we're off. Wait, just a minute. Albert and Greta left without listening to my objections. You must be kidding. I couldn't believe it. I don't care if it sounds narrow-minded. Living with Greta? No. It would be stressful, overwhelming, a life of constant tolerance. What should I do? It seems Greta had no intention of returning to Ken and Becky's. Albert appears accepting of living with Greta. I doubt Ken and Becky would chase after Greta if she left. This is bad. I'm at a complete disadvantage. I feel like despairing, complaining and rolling onto my bed. I suddenly felt something off. The arrangement of my cosmetics was different. Did Greta use them? If she wanted to use them, she could have asked. But more than that, I don't like someone entering my room without permission. I don't have proof yet that Greta entered my room and used my makeup, but I felt a sense of disgust. Perhaps I'm being overly sensitive after hearing Becky's story. Still, I definitely felt something was off. I started to search my room anxiously. Closet, bookshelf, small item storage. Ah, I exclaimed involuntarily. $100 was missing from the $300 I had put in a drawer to deposit in the bank tomorrow. There should have been $300, but only $200 was there. No way. Becky's story seemed more credible now. Her previous information and the missing $100. The image of Greta taking money from our home became vivid in my mind. I felt alarmed. I couldn't handle living with someone I didn't get along with, especially if money issues were involved. This couldn't go on. I absolutely couldn't live with Greta. Albert and Greta returned at 9 p.m. I finally got to talk to Albert when Greta went to take a bath. Hey, what are we going to do about Greta? She's going to live here. I don't want that. I can't live with her. Huh? What's that about? What can I say? You're heartless. Mom was kicked out of Ken's house. It seems she left on her own. I talked to Becky. Even so, we can't just turn away Mom with nowhere to go. Not right away. She could rent an apartment or something. Once she's ready, she could move there. You know, Greta and I don't get along. You're just dismissing all of Mom's concerns. You were the one complaining about her, remember? Was I? I forgot. But living together isn't so bad. Mom said she'll contribute to the household. I don't trust her promises. Christy, that's terrible. What have I done to you? A high-pitched scream came from behind. Greta had come out of the bath and into the living room. It hadn't even been 5 minutes. You think that about me? I can't leave my dear Albert with someone like you. Break up. Huh? Break up? That escalated quickly. Albert is wonderful. He respects his parents and is caring, much better than Ken. It's a shame he's the second son. I can't let someone as twisted as you have him. Break up. I'll live with Albert. Leave. Greta was ranting, but somehow smiling. Something was off. Greta, why are you smiling like that? What? You finished your bath too quickly. Were you waiting outside the room, hoping I'd say something wrong? Your hair is dry, but I didn't hear a hairdryer. That's not true. How rude. Greta was clearly flustered. Looking at Albert, he was avoiding eye contact. How obvious. They were conspiring to kick me out. I felt anger towards them. Who's the terrible one now? Albert, what is this about? Me? As if there's anyone else here to call upon. Albert looked back and forth between me and Greta. Me with my eyes narrowed in anger, and Greta with her wicked smile. Albert, it's okay, just say it. Greta urged Albert. Then he nodded and spoke up assertively. I want to live with Mom, not you. You're the one who should leave. Pack your bags and go. Huh? My voice came from deep within, making Albert flinch. See, Albert also can't live with you. You're the problem, Christy. Greta pointed at me as if accusing a criminal. That's right. That's right. Albert joined in, waving his arms. What a coward. Scared just a moment ago. My love for Albert disappeared at that moment. Completely and utterly. What kind of man is this? He didn't listen to me at all, just followed Greta's words. Infuriating. Unforgivable. Fine, divorce it is. Divorce? Christy, how understanding of you at the end. That's great, Albert. That's not the response to a grand gesture like this. I don't need alimony. I'll take all the furniture and appliances I bought. That's okay, right? Sure, that's fine, right, Albert? Greta was in a good mood. Albert was flustered by the rapidly progressing situation. You'll regret this, I thought. That night, we downloaded the divorce papers from the City Hall's website and filled them out. It felt impulsive, but I couldn't stand a life parroticized by Greta. I didn't need an Albert who treated me as an inconvenience either. Greta volunteered to be a witness on the divorce papers. I asked Becky to be the other witness. We submitted the divorce papers promptly. I also advanced the moving out process. After filing for divorce, I stopped talking to Albert and Greta completely. We were like strangers who happened to be on the same flight. The atmosphere was not comfortable, but it was just a matter of enduring until I moved out. On moving day, I directed the movers to take out the furniture and appliances. The belongings quickly disappeared from the house. Greta exclaimed when she saw the air conditioner being removed. Wait, Christy, why are you taking down the air conditioner? Why? I bought it. Where did the TV go? The TV is mine too, and so are the washing machine, vacuum cleaner, microwave, and hairdryer. Before we got married, Albert lived in a furnished studio apartment. I, on the other hand, had my own furniture in a normal rental. When we decided to live together, I brought most of it here. I left the refrigerator, which we bought when we got married, for a bigger one, and the scale. What are you doing? Put them back. We can't live without these. Albert knows most of the furniture and appliances are mine, right? Albert stood dazed, watching the belongings being carried out. The movers seemed concerned about the exchange between me and Greta. I asked them to please continue without minding us. Throughout the process, Greta continued to criticize and blame me, directly and boldly, muttering on the side, looking at Albert and me as if we were something unbelievable. Pretending to cry and collapse, she kept attacking me in various ways. It was impressive how she showed so many reactions in such a short time. I think it's amazing. Maybe Ken became mentally worn down, being constantly spoken ill of by Greta. I feel sympathy for him. When the work was done, I asked Greta, "By the way, have you decided where you're moving to?" "Moving? Where to?" "Yes, after all, this place is a company-owned house of my company." "What?" Greta was shocked. "Company-owned house? Of your employer?" "Yes, so if I leave, you too can't stay here." "What?" "I've already informed my company about the divorce and given them Albert's contact details. I think the HR department will contact you soon." "Goodbye, then." I cheerfully said my farewell. Greta looked stunned. Albert just nodded vaguely. My new place is a single-person company-owned house. The one I lived in until recently was a family-type company-owned house. Moving has shortened my commute and given me more time in the mornings. Housework is just for one now. I can even enjoy a drink whenever I like. How comfortable it is to live alone. I was appreciating the joys of living alone when my phone rang after work. It was Albert. Feeling good from the drink, I unwisely answered, even though I should have ignored it. "Christy, I was wrong. Come back," Albert exclaimed as soon as the call connected. "I'm already home." "Not that home. I mean, come back here." Why?" What a ridiculous thing to say. I couldn't help but laugh. "The HR department from your company contacted me. They said I could stay here." "That's good for you." "Not good. This place has a rent of $13,000. "Well, it's a well-located family property." "It's a convenient family property with necessary shops nearby. That's a reasonable price." Until now, there was a company rent assistance, and Albert and I split the remaining rent. That's what the $300 I left at the house was for, $100 of which Greta stole. "I got swayed by Mom. She said she had nowhere to go. I was her only hope. Flattered me. I got carried away trying to protect Mom and was harsh to you. I never really wanted a divorce." "But it's already done. Too late." "And I can't afford to live on my own salary. To furnish the house, pay the rent, and take care of Mom too. It's impossible." "Really? You're realizing this now? It was obvious." "Christy, I was wrong. Please come back." "You told me to leave, and I can't be family with Greta again. Bye." "Just wait, Christy." "I'm not waiting." I turned off my mobile phone and drank a beer. Ah, delicious. I don't need an Albert who neglects me just for a bit of flattery. I forgot about him and happily got drunk. The next morning, I rushed to work in a panic. I turned off my phone last night, forgetting about the alarm, and nearly overslept. When I arrived at work, before the start time, I checked my phone. As expected, there were countless messages from Albert. I ignored them all. What I wanted to see was... There it is, an email from Becky. "Enjoying your single life? Thanks to you, our family's move is complete." Great. They've finished moving too. Actually, I had anticipated Albert's failure and suggested moving to Ken and Becky. Albert likely couldn't maintain the standard of living Greta desired, so Greta would inevitably return to Ken and Becky. They definitely wanted to avoid that. So the plan was to move away before Greta shamelessly came back. I made the suggestion when I asked Becky to be a witness for the divorce. Ken and Becky held family meetings and decided to move. Their new location is unknown to me. I texted Becky, "Congratulations, I'm relieved." Months later, Albert and Greta moved out of that company-owned house. They had no choice but to move. They had to, since Albert couldn't afford the $13,000 monthly rent. They moved to an old apartment far from the station, in the opposite direction of my new place. Greta had thought they could live in a company-owned house near the station. That plan failed, and she quickly started blaming Albert. She didn't contribute the promised money either. She once tried returning to Ken and Becky's house, only to find they'd already moved and someone else lived there. Lost and disappointed, she returned to Albert's place, unleashing her bad mood. Albert kept contacting me for help. I'm not involved. I enjoy being alone. Recently, I got tired of Albert's frequent updates and changed my phone number. Now I won't be bothered by annoying Greta. No more worries about being stuck with a man who can't stand up to his mom. This divorce corrected the course of my life. I just turned 27. A failed marriage is no big deal. There's still so much life ahead.